Is it time?
It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day.
We'll know in a very short period of time, but it looks like it could be something that will be not good. Believe me, not good.
I see issue with that. And again, hey.
You're not going to be able to insult your way to the presidency. That's not going to happen.
I don't know who created Pokemon Go, but I'm trying to figure out how we get them to have Pokemon go to the polls.
I'm Ted Cruz, and my pronoun is kiss my ass.
So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put him.
Not good. Believe me, not good.
Hello, dissidents. Welcome, one and all, to a special Tuesday matinee Christmas Eve edition of the Do Dissidents podcast. Keaton Weiss here with Russell Dobular, of course.
Feliz Navidad.
That's right. Merry Christmas, everybody. America's back. We're so back. We can say Merry Christmas again. We're so back. We're so back. It feels so good, doesn't it? I hope you guys all got good presents for the people you love. Christmas is a big opportunity to disappoint the people you love by getting them shitty presents and signaling to them that you don't really care about them or that you don't really understand them. This is a nice little game we like. This is a you talk about a psyop. Christmas is a psyop. It's a big psyop we all play on each other. No, we're not going to go spend money on ourselves.
They untransed Santa.
Exactly. We're going to guess what our friends and family members might enjoy having around their home. We're going to guess what they're interested in, and we're going to buy it for them, and we're going to hope that they like it. And if they like it, they're going to think we're such sweet people. And if they don't like it, they're going to think, what an asshole got me this thoughtless gift. I always find Christmas is a real high wire act. I don't like it. I don't enjoy it.
What do you get gifts for?
My wife, my parents, that's it.
That's it?
That's it. Yeah, and this year she made it easy for me. She told me what she wanted. Now, this is the real thing you got to watch out for.
That's considerate.
Okay, well, here's the problem, okay? So if your significant other tells you what they want for Christmas, you have to get them that plus something else. You can't just give them what they want, because then they're going to think, well, I guess you didn't care enough to take the task upon yourself to think about what I might like, in addition to what I told you I like. So if they tell you what they want, you got to get them that plus another thing. It's very, very stressful.
I can see why you're such a Seinfeld fan.
Yeah. No, you can't just get them what they want.
Do you just get them what they asked for? Yeah, or is it a test?
That's my favorite line. One of my favorite lines in Seinfeld is with the brilliance of the show. They get invited to a dinner party, and they are going to split tasks, and two of them are going to go split off and get wine. Two of them are going to go get a cake or something. And George says, "Why do we have to bring anything to the dinner party?" And I think it's Elaine who says, "Because it's rude otherwise." And he says, it's rude. So he says, just going somewhere because I'm invited is rude. To simply show up where I'm invited is rude. Yes, you not only have to show up, you have to do another thing. You have to bring them something. So well, yes, it is the end of a very stressful time of the year for me, and I hope you guys all have fun, whatever your holiday plans are.
My normal Christmas venue, they're very hard to buy for, to figure out what to get. I mean, not that they'd be assholes like, oh, why'd you get me this? But
right.
It's very, because, you know, like.
No, they talk about you when you leave. If you get them a shitty gift, they won't say that. This is the other part. This is why I say it's psychologically torturing. They won't say it to your face that the gift sucks. They're going to talk about when you leave. Can you believe he got me this piece of shit?
Yeah.
What was he thinking? I guess he just didn't care. I guess he probably got that at the last minute. Right, that's what they're saying behind your back. You never hear that, but that's what they're all saying.
He's a scab. He's a scab. He ordered it from Amazon.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
He's a scab. I know exactly which store sells that on Amazon.
Right, exactly.
I get all my power tools from the same exact place. Yeah, no, they you know, because they're pretty well to do, so you're not going to get them anything that's going to, you know, impress them in that way.
Right.
So you have to be thoughtful.
Right. Exactly. It's hard. It's very hard. Well, I hope you did all right. I hope everybody did all right.
I think I did. Obviously, the kids are easier.
The kids are easy. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Get them like a rock and a you know, helpless animal to play with.
Yeah, they'll love that. Yeah. I got you a rock and an injured squirrel I found at the train station.
Yeah. Only for the boy, though.
Yeah, only for the boy. That's right. That's right. Well, who you're going to? They have twins, right? A boy and a girl.
Yeah, they have twins. They're 10 now. So, you know, I got them. I always get them like educational toys. That's the kind of it's the kind of thing I would want. But they're smart kids, so they should like those things. And yeah, you know, you go with like nice, thoughtful, cool things for the adults because you can't go for the upscale things. So yeah, you go from like, hey, this is sangria from a special farm that makes it themselves, and they crush it with their own feet.
Yeah,
you know, you have to go that way.
Yeah, exactly. So we hope you guys all did all right, and buckle in for our Christmas Eve show. So folks, for those of you who signed up as Patreon, Substack, or Locals members, we had a great time with you last night on the supporter stream. That was fun, and then this is our last show until Sunday. It's our last show until Sunday night. So we are taking the Thursday morning after Christmas off. So that's our holiday break. So we'll be back Sunday. So we're missing one show, just the one show. That's it. Not too much rest for us too. But all right, let's get started. All right, folks. So this was the segment that got away from me. I thought this was going to be a quick, easy one.
The one that got away.
The one that got away. The one that got away. It's a light, funny piece. We like to start out with light, funny pieces. But here's Donald Trump. We will never let the Panama Canal fall into the wrong hands. That's right. Donald Trump has set his sights on the Panama Canal.
Wow.
This reminds me of the meme, you know, the Pawn Stars meme when they say best I can do is blank. We want an anti-war president. Best I can do is attack Panama.
Yeah.
Best we could do is conquer Panama, take the canal back. Yes, Donald Trump at Turning Point USA had this to say about how ripped off we're getting at the Panama Canal.
Being ripped off at the Panama Canal like we're being ripped off everywhere else. A secure, he just said take it back. That's a good idea. Where do you come from, sir? He doesn't come from Panama. Oh, yeah, good. A secure Panama Canal is crucial for U.S. commerce and rapid deployment of the Navy from the Atlantic all the way to the Pacific. It's an incredible thing, and drastically cut shipping times down to U.S. ports by days and even weeks. The United States is the #1 user of the Panama Canal, with over 72% of all transits heading to or from U.S. ports. Think of that. So we built it. We're the ones that use it. They gave it away. Considered one of the one of the great wonders of the world. The Panama Canal opened for business 110 years ago and was built at huge cost to the United States. And It really is big when you consider the lives and the treasure, the equivalent of $1.2 trillion today. You don't hear those numbers. 38,000 American men, almost all men, they went there to be construction.
All right. I'm not going to keep doing this, but when you pitched this, I haven't watched this yet. I just assumed this was one of his crazy, would you rather drown or get eaten by a shark? I thought this was one of those things he blurted out.
Yeah.
I cannot believe this is on the teleprompter. They actually decided to have him give a speech about taking back the fucking Panama Canal by design.
Yeah, no, he had all these facts ready to go, and by facts I mean lies.
Wow,
they're not actually facts, as we'll get to. 38,000 American men did not die building the Panama Canal, but we will get into all that. But no, he had this ready to go. This was not like something he said on a whim. No, he had this prepped.
If there's a better example of the way they just want to throw out nonsense and get people fighting over it while they do the real shit on the side, I can't think of it. Like, we're gonna send the Marines into Panama. That's what's gonna happen now.
Well, it worked for at least a few hours yesterday. This was quite the trending topic. It definitely took people's eye off the ball for a little while. He goes on.
Workers and they were diggers. They went there to be construction workers and they were diggers. And they were brave. 38,000 men died from infected mosquitoes in the jungles of Panama during the construction period. Think of that. We lost 38,000 men. Teddy Roosevelt was president of the United States at the time of its building and understood the strength of naval power and trade. When President Jimmy Carter foolishly gave it away for $1. During his term in office, it was solely for Panama to manage and not for China or any other country to manage. You see what's going on there? China. It was likewise not given for Panama to charge the United States, its Navy, and its corporations doing business within our country exorbitant prices and rates of passage, which they do. They charge us like it's a disgrace. Our Navy and Commerce have been treated in a very unfair and injudicious way. The fees being charged by Panama are ridiculous, highly unfair, especially knowing the extraordinary generosity that has been bestowed to Panama, I say very foolishly, by the United States.
All right. There you have it. Trump threatens to try to take the Panama Canal. Panama's president balks at the suggestion. Donald Trump suggested Sunday that his new administration could try to regain control of the Panama Canal that the United States, quote, foolishly ceded to its Central American ally, contending that shippers are charged ridiculous fees to pass through the vital transportation channel linking the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Panama's conservative president, Jose Raul Mulino, who was elected in May on a pro-business platform, roundly rejected that notion as an affront to his country's sovereignty. The United States built the canal in the early 1900s as it looked for ways to facilitate the transit of commercial and military vessels between its coasts. Washington relinquished control of the waterway to Panama on December 31st, 1999, under a treaty signed in 1977 by President Jimmy Carter. The canal depends on reservoirs to operate its locks and was heavily affected by 2023 Central American droughts that forced it to substantially reduce the number of daily slots for crossing ships. With fewer ships using the canal each day, administrators also increased the fees that are charged all shippers for reserving a slot. With weather returning to normal in the later months of this year, transit on the canal has normalized, but price increases are still expected for next year. Mulino, Panama's president, has been described as a conservative populist who aligns with Trump on many issues. Panama is a strong U.S. ally, and the canal is crucial for its economy, generating about 1/5 of that government's annual revenue. Still, Trump said that once his second term is underway, if the principles, both moral and legal, of this magnanimous gesture of giving are not followed, then we will demand that the Panama Canal be returned to the United States of America in full, quickly, and without question. I'm not going to stand for it, Trump said. So to the officials of Panama, please be guided accordingly. The United States, this is from his Truth Social tweet, has a vested interest in the secure, efficient, and reliable operation of the Panama Canal, and that was always understood. We would and will never let it fall into the wrong hands. It was not given for the benefit of others, but merely as a token of cooperation with us in Panama. If the principles, both moral and legal, of this magnanimous gesture of giving are not followed, then we will demand that the Panama Canal be returned to us in full and without question. To the officials of Panama, please be guided accordingly. Shortly after Trump's speech, Molino released a video declaring that every square meter of the canal belongs to Panama and will continue to belong to his country. Without mentioning Trump by name, Molino addressed Trump's complaints over rising fees for ships crossing the canal, saying they are set by experts who take into account operational costs and supply and demand factors. So here is President Molino telling him in not so many words to basically go get your fucking shine box.
Patriotas, como presidente, quiero expresar de manera precisa que cada metro cuadrado del Canal de Panamá y su zona adyacente es de Panamá y lo seguirá siendo. La soberanía e independencia de nuestro país no son negociables. Cada panameño, aquí o en cualquier lugar del mundo, lo lleva en su corazón y es parte de nuestra historia de lucha y una conquista irreversible. Los tratados Torrijos-Carter de 1977 acordaron la disolución de la ex zona del canal, reconociendo la soberanía panameña y la entrega completa del canal a Panamá, que finalizó el 31 de diciembre de 1999, y pronto celebraremos los 25 años de esta transferencia. Desde entonces, no hubo objeciones ni reclamos. Al contrario, ha sido motivo de fuerte apoyo internacional y orgullo nacional. Se operó y amplió por decisión panameña y hoy representa un gran activo que aporta miles de millones de dólares a nuestra economía.
So, by the way, folks, Trump mentioned China. Just want to throw this in. So this is Zhu Jinyang, who is the Chinese ambassador to Colombia. He tweets out yesterday, China will, as always, respect Panama's sovereignty over the canal and recognize the canal as a permanently neutral international waterway. We believe that China will continue to make contributions to exchanges and integration among countries and improve human well-being. Hard to believe that, countries would rather deal with China than us. See, that's the kind of spirit you get from China when they make an investment in another country, or in this case, simply acknowledging a country's sovereignty. It's not like a loan from a mob boss. Hey, we're going to build this for you, and then don't fuck us, or we're going to come take it back, and we're going to crush you for it. They actually say we respect your sovereignty. So who do you think people would rather deal with, them or us? Because Trump, on the other hand, then took to his social media site to offer a response. We'll see about that. He also posted a picture of a U.S. flag planted in the canal zone under the phrase, "Welcome to the United States Canal." So again, how China responds to this, how America responds to this. We'll see about that. Welcome to the United States Canal. A tale of two powers, ladies and gentlemen. A tale of two powers.
I like how he's handling himself, though. I'm going to use that. If someone's like, "You're 2 hours late," I'm going to go, "China."
Yeah, China. Yeah, right, exactly.
You can get out of anything that way. China.
Yes. So this created quite the brouhaha on Twitter. Libs of TikTok, all of a sudden, an expert on this topic, apparently.
Yes,
an estimated.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Every random asshole with an anti-woke account is an expert on everything, don't you know?
Right. They know as soon as Trump says something, they're an expert in that topic, right? An estimated 25,000 Americans died building the Panama Canal, which Jimmy Carter gave away. Now, as you can see, that is reader noted, which we'll get to in a moment. But here come the idiots. All of a sudden, they know, man, this is so frustrating. Those folks sacrificed their lives for it, and we just handed it over? That ain't right. It's a tragic fact, says NLR, that around 25,000 Americans lost their lives building the Panama Canal, a monumental feat of engineering and sacrifice. Yet in a move that defies logic and patriotism, Jimmy Carter...
Pinko.
What?
Pinko.
Yeah, Pinko. In a move that defies logic and patriotism, Jimmy Carter handed over control of the canal to Panama in 1977. Woke. That's what it was, because he's woke.
Yeah,
that's his
woke.
problem. Yeah. All that American blood, sweat...
Like all the evangelical Christians. They're very woke.
Right.
They're known for it.
All that American blood, sweat, and tears sacrificed for a strategic asset that Carter essentially gave away, weakening our global position and showing a disturbing lack of respect for the legacy of those who died building it. Some decisions can't be undone, but this one will forever be a stain on his presidency. Why would we hand over vital national interest, especially when they've cost so much? Well, one reason why you might hand over a vital national interest is because if you look at a map, the Panama Canal is in Panama. So after a while,
there's that. Yeah.
You know, in order to maintain good relations, hey, this is on your lands. It's been a century, so it's yours now. It's yours now. Because like I said, not every leader is Tony Soprano on the world stage. Not every American leader functions that way, although most of them do. On the right,
you know what else was different then? When you polled people around the world, most of them liked us.
Right. Yeah, exactly. People liked America back then. Exactly. Exactly. I love this one. I always heard Carter was the worst president, but that was before my time, so I never knew what he did. Yeah. This is what people really hate Jimmy Carter for, by the way.
And now, now you know what he did because you read about it on X.
Right, 5 minutes ago.
Now
Exactly.
you know all about his whole administration, yeah.
Now, this guy's lost. Why do you all suddenly care about this? What's happening? This is what happens. This is the way a lot of people absorb news on X. You'll see something trending, and you're like, what happened? What happened? So he's a little slow in the uptake. But then you have, this was something we studied in history class. We should have never given it away. Take it back, says Daily Dose.
Just amazing.
Of X.
Amazing.
Yeah. Hopefully, says Aaron, Trump takes it back and reclaims what is ours. Yeah, real anti-establishment, anti-imperialist vibes coming from the MAGA faithful.
No, it's yours, third fry cook at the Burger King.
Yeah, right.
It's yours.
Right.
Yeah, no, we take this back. It's a triumph for you personally. It's really going to improve the value of your life and your standing in the community.
Well, Trump has really succeeded in making people feel like personally attached to the fate of billionaires in the military-industrial complex. We have the most beautiful planes in our military. Who we? You mean me? No. Right. You mean Raytheon got paid to build? You mean Boeing got paid to build the weapons? Like that. Right. Those are who get rich off of that. It's theirs. It's not ours. But he has been very successful in convincing people that what is in the billionaires' interest and what is in the military-industrial complex's interest is in their interest. You have ownership over that.
Right.
He's been successful in that. So now comes the opposition. This is not true, you moron, meaning 25,000 Americans did not die building the Panama Canal. And this brings us to the reader note. Out of the 25 to 30,000 deaths during the construction of the Panama Canal, only about 5,600 were American workers. And you'll see there is a major asterisk next to that 5,600 figure, which the community note did not account for. Of course, the French oversaw the first phase of the Panama Canal, and then America took it over once they failed. Okay, so if you ask Grok, which is X's AI, break down the deaths of workers building the Panama Canal by nationality. So Grok says only 31 U.S. citizens died during the American construction phase, which is wrong. And so Grok is very flawed. It can lead you in the right direction, but you always have to vet the source. See, in the bottom right corner of the Grok fact, there's a source, and we're going to get into that in a second. Caribbean workers, primarily from Barbados, Jamaica, Martinique, and Guadeloupe, out of the 5,609 workers who died, the majority were from the Caribbean, with numbers from specific islands not fully documented but known to be significant. And then it gives you a breakdown in the year 1910. Okay, so if you notice, the source for that second claim there is a think tank called the Progressive Policy Institute, which actually sourced their claims from official documents at the time, the Isthmian Canal Commission, which put out annual reports on worker deaths. All right, the first claim was sourced from Ivor Powell 4.0. Like it just crowdsources what people are saying and presents them as answers. So that 31 U.S. citizens died, that was according to the report from 1910. So that was 31 American deaths in one specific year. Okay, but here is from the more credible source. The initial French attempt to build the canal in the 1880s, before the discovery of the mosquito vector for yellow fever, proved beyond the reach of the 19th century technology and failed at the cost of 22,000 lives. So that was the French effort.
But really, we should give this to France.
Well, we're getting to it. The successful early 20th century American effort wasn't much safer. 5,609 of the 56,000 workers, mostly recruited from Barbados, Jamaica, and other Caribbean islands, died over the 8 years of construction. So they were mostly not Americans. They were workers from the islands that America contracted and therefore they now count as Americans. See? Getting a clearer picture now in your head, starting to all kind of come together, folks, right? By country, the Canal Commission's 1910 death toll included 167 workers from Barbados, 113 from Jamaica, 49 from Martinique and Guadeloupe, 60 from other Caribbean islands, 48 from Spain, 36 from Colombia and Panama, and 31 from the United States. So 31 documented American deaths in 1910. That's not the total number. It gets to the total number. The Canal Commission's massive labor recruitment on Barbados is said to have brought 40% of the island's working age men to Panama and cut the population from 200,000 in 1900 to 172,000 in 1910. The total workforce added 12,000 from the United States, 16,000 from other Caribbean islands, and 8,000 from Europe and Latin America, to the 20,000 Barbadians. A tenth of them died during construction, 5,609 people. Now, these are considered American deaths, according to the Google searches, because this was during the period where America was overseeing the construction. But of those 5,600 deaths, including 4,290 Caribbean workers. So about 80% of who we count as American deaths were Caribbean workers that we contracted to build the canal. It wasn't Ed and Edna, shipped down from Pennsylvania to go build, right? Of yellow fever, malaria, landslides, explosions, railway accidents, and other illnesses and workplace injuries. So here is a little slideshow from PBS's American Experience, which just breaks down the labor conditions on the canal. The large majority of laborers along the Panamanian Isthmus came from the West Indies, especially from the sugar-producing island of Barbados. By 1907, the labor force consisted of 24,000 men, more than 75% of whom hailed from the West Indies. Here, West Indians worked with tripod drills at the upper Miraflores locks. The vast majority of West Indian workers were given labor-intensive jobs such as digging ditches, cutting brush, carrying lumber, operating rock drills, or fumigation equipment, or dynamiting, which we'll get into in a minute. European workers were paid well at 20 cents an hour and earned a reputation as some of the hardest and steadiest workers. They slept in less crowded barracks and enjoyed special dining areas complete with tables and chairs, which were a rarity. White managers mingle with the West Indian concrete workers that's pictured in that photo above. Segregation in the canal zone was defined by gold and silver status. Largely white gold workers were skilled craftsmen who were paid in gold. Silver workers, mostly black, were typically unskilled and paid in local silver currency. As more U.S. workers remained in Panama for longer periods of time, they formed organizations such as the Brotherhood of Railroad Trainsmen and the Oddfellows. Only white skilled laborers, those on the gold roll, were allowed to access these clubs. Here, in the photo above, Men practice bowling at the YMCA in Gatun. Picture's getting even clearer, isn't it? Considered the worst task, dynamiting was a job that most West Indian workers had to do at some point. Uncertain of their return, those sent to dynamite would leave their personal belongings with friends. In this image, a laborer stands knee-deep in dynamite debris. So, all of that to say, yeah, we built it. It's ours. We need it back. That's the takeaway from that whole story, is it not? Basically, it's ours. It's ours.
Sure. Yeah. This is a pretty typical example of why, a lot of people, why are you so negative? Well, this is why, because it looks like an op. I'm sorry, man. Like, I don't mean to harp on that. And actually, when we get into the O'Brien thing, I'll have some very positive things to say about the MAGA project, at least on some level, or some parts of it. But this stuff, I mean, Trump just goes up there and lies. He just makes shit up. And okay, all right, you want to say all politicians do it? He's just a little more brazen? Okay, fair enough. But it's interesting when you have this movement that's been so critical of the libs for being mindless, of just going along with whatever Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi tell them, that it's incredible. Like anything Donald Trump says, all of a sudden you're very angry about the fucking Panama Canal, something that, let's face it, you know nothing about.
You know nothing about.
You know absolutely nothing about. Why are you making the argument that we need to go take back an asset that is in another country? This would be like the British arguing, yes, 100,000 British died to keep Africa British.
Right.
So,
of course.
So you built it in another country. You had no choice.
Right.
Because if you wanted this canal,
that's where
that wasn't our land. We had to put the canal through there.
Around. Yeah, right.
Can't move the land. It's their country. And so eventually, in a frankly rare case of conscience and international affairs, Carter went ahead and did the right thing.
Right. Almost 100 full years later. And if you look at...
We didn't get our money's worth.
Right, exactly. If you look at the mythology of it, first of all, Trump says 38,000 Americans died. Obviously way wrong. Libs of TikTok says 25,000 died. Obviously way wrong. Even the official number is only right in a technical sense. They were American in the fact that we paid them. What we basically did was we hired slaves to build it, for the most part, right? The American debts building the canal were probably about 1,000, because of the 5,600 that are counted as American debts, 4,200 were Caribbean islanders who we hired to work for lower wages than the white Americans, eat shittier food than the white Americans, sleep in less comfortable quarters than the white Americans, go and dynamite the zone, which mostly the white people didn't have to do. So we gave them the shittier, more dangerous jobs and treated them lousier. And so way more of them died than people who came from Pennsylvania to go work on the Panama Canal. But the version of history that Donald Trump and Libs of TikTok would have you know is that 38,000 Americans gave their lives for this canal, and so it's ours. And God damn it, we want it back. Now, all this debate notwithstanding, there is one thing we all failed to consider, and Meghan McCain reminds us of this. Trump is right about the Panama Canal. This is very personal. My dad was born in the Panama Canal zone. Didn't think of that. Maybe I should have put that at the top, since that's obviously the most important piece of information when we're thinking about what to do with the Panama Canal, is that Meghan McCain's father was born in the canal zone.
Yeah, Meghan McCain was really the person the term Nepo baby was created for. If Meghan McCain were not John McCain's daughter, she would be asking you if you want fries with that. Why she feels qualified to weigh in on anything is beyond me. She came off as an idiot on The View. That's when you come off as stupid compared to that brain trust, you got to be a pretty dumb person.
I say Meghan McCain lacks the talent to wait tables at a Cracker Barrel. They would put her at the cash register in the Cracker Barrel. She'd be in the store section.
They'd make her hostess.
Work in the register, hostess, right. She's not talented enough to wait tables at Cracker Barrel if her father wasn't who he was. And so funny how she should introduce that little factoid.
How are you just not embarrassed? You know, you're this mega Nepo baby.
Right.
You know there's a whole conversation going on in society about Nepo babies right now. Shut the fuck up about your dad. Nobody cares. Shut up. Cares. Stay out of it.
How is that relevant to this? How's that relevant to this question that your dad was born there? Wow. But anyway, that's the story of Donald Trump trying to reclaim the Panama Canal. Just funny how bullshit spreads. You know, like I said, with X, when it comes to Grok, even when it comes to the community nodes, it's trust but verify. It's trust but verify, right? You got to watch what you read there, because look at all that shit. Look, Libs of TikTok, huge account, tweets out 25,000 American dies. All of a sudden, you got dozens of people tweeting out like as if they knew this all along. As if they knew this all along. Oh, this was something we studied. Really? Where did you learn that 25,000 Americans died? Because that's not true. So what history class did you take that said that?
Well, I'm sorry. When I look at things like this, on the one hand, I would love to, and again, we'll get into this in the O'Brien-Tucker interview, I would love to feel that the Republican Party is morphing into the new working class party, and they're going to be responsive to the fact that they've brought in all these union members and O'Brien has Trump's ear. I would love to believe that, and I hope it plays out that way. When I see things like this, that is the element where you say, well, this is a pretty typical fascist movement, where you have this partnership between corporate power and the government, where the rich are working hand in hand with the state, and they're selling people who have no particular investment in those institutions on a realistic level, on the idea that they are the good folk and that their self-worth is built on supporting this alliance between corporate power and the state. And in the interest of building that perception, you just tell them the most idiotic nonsense. And this is key. They don't question it.
Right.
That's a key element that makes it play as fascistic to me. Right. That you could literally, and this demonstrates it, you could tell these fucking people anything.
Right.
Anything. And it's not just Trump. It's Mark Andreessen going on Rogan and getting everyone mad at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. That is incredibly dangerous, that you've got these people who do not have the best interests of the country or the people in it at heart in any way, shape, or form. Mark Andreessen literally robs old ladies of their life savings for a living.
Right.
And you've got these working people screaming the next day about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that they know nothing about, have no understanding of, because he went on Joe Rogan and called it woke.
Exactly. Yeah. Out of nowhere, out of fucking nowhere, the guy brings up, we want the Panama Canal back.
Panama Canal. All of a sudden, these people,
all of Twitter, it's ours.
These people can't. They're obsessed with the Panama Canal. There's always been a big issue for me.
Right.
I have a poster of the Panama Canal zone on my wall.
Within minutes, they know everything. Within minutes, Libs of TikTok knows everything about it. Yes, we need to take this back.
It's very sad, man. It just shows you how many people out there just feel like they have no power. They have no voice, and so they glom onto this to make themselves feel like they're part of a movement. And it's a movement. It's a movement for very rich people that really don't care about you, and they're using you insofar as they need you to support their project.
Right. Exactly. Eric Rousseau says Panama stole the land from Colombia by U.S. empire. Well, that's the other thing. We funded the rebels to basically create the political conditions that led to building it, which means that it's our country. That's the logic. The logic is, well, Panama wouldn't exist if not for us, so give it back 100 years later. Look at the difference between the way we treat other countries and the way China treats other countries. Right. When they build roads in Africa, do they come to them and say, okay, now if you don't play ball with us, we're going to invade your country and it's going to be ours? Which is essentially what Trump is threatening to do. You would cripple Panama if you seize the canal. That's 20% of their economy.
Yeah.
right? So does China treat countries that way? No.
We
treat countries that way.
Which, on the bright side, I got to say, there are probably too many American retirees in Panama for them to really pull that shit.
Yeah, probably. All right, we're going to read some super chats and then move on to segment number 2. We got a nice crowd in here for Christmas Eve, 1,600 strong in the YouTube chat, 909 over on Rumble. Please smash that like button, follow button on Rumble, subscribe button on YouTube, and share this stream, please. And thank you. Mark Puglisi, thanks for the $5, says, shout out to Francesca Albanese. Some women with balls are on our side. Absolutely. Shout out to her. Virtuoso, thanks for the $5, says, Bill Clinton just left the hospital. My thoughts and prayers go out to the flu he had. Yes, he was in the hospital with a fever. Yes. JM, thanks for the $2 and the thumbs up. Appreciate that. Let's see. Danny says, Russell, a good gift idea for next year is an all-expense paid trip to attend one of the private room sessions for the movie Hostel. Yeah, there you go. That's an idea. Eric Torres says, didn't the U.S. cause a coup in Colombia in order to break off Panama and build a canal? Yes, they did. Yep. And that's why a lot of the MAGA people are saying, well, that country wouldn't exist if not for us. So I guess it doesn't really have a right to exist, right? And this is why Donald Trump is really, at the end of the day, not the threat to the deep state that a lot of people think he is, because he shares that same presumption that we just have a right to take over another country if we want to.
Right.
Well, you're charging us too much, so we're just going to have to go back and reclaim what's it's ours. It's ours. Because we helped you build it, it's now ours 100 years later, and if you don't give it to us, we're going to come take it. He believes that. Jake Sullivan believes that. Anthony Blinken believes that. Donald Rumsfeld believed that. They all believe that. They all, at the core, believe that. And that's why, ultimately, at the end of the day, they can pretty much work with any of these people.
Yeah, the system can work with Trump. They could not work with Bernie Sanders. That represented a dramatically different approach to domestic and foreign policy.
Even though they probably could have strong-armed him into doing what they wanted at the end of the day.
Probably, but they didn't see it that way. Mm-hmm. They didn't see it that way, clearly. They made sure listen, they would not have missed with Bernie Sanders. That's all I'm saying. They were not going to let that motherfucker be in the White House. Because, hey, you never know, man. You never know. The guy could have gone on TV and said, I'm asking everyone in the country who has the means to come to Washington right now. What the hell would they do with that?
Right. Of course. That would have been not good. Believe me, not good. All right. Soprano Christmas quatrain, gold chains glinting bright, whispers in the bada bing night, Paulie's wisdom guides loyalty, his silent pride. Thank you, Abiding. Appreciate that very much. Hillary Hinton says, the flaming NYC subway woman has really gotten to me. I can't unsee it. Real question, is this dimension that we live in hell or purgatory? I'll hang up and listen to your answers. Also, Merry Christmas. Looks a lot like hell to me, man. I mean, metaphorically, you got people burning alive in Gaza, people burning alive on the New York City subway. It's pretty dystopian. I would say that.
Yeah. Anyone who was a fan of the Buffy spinoff Angel, my favorite moment in Angel is he finally gets the henchman of the devil to take him to the head office. He thinks he's going to go out in a blaze of glory fighting Satan or fighting in hell. And when the elevator opens to the head office, they haven't gone anywhere. It's here.
There you go. Yep. All right, let's move on. We got Sean O'Brien with Tucker Carlson.
All right, so I cannot recommend this interview enough. It was really interesting, and it's a good example of how confusing the times that we live in are. We're not going to be showing this part, but part of the reason it's worth watching in its entirety, Tucker Carlson on his own brought up how nobody talks about the banks. We need to go after the banks. Religions have all said that usury is against God. Islam, Judaism, Christianity. So why Tucker Carlson brings up that the mafia charged a lower VIG than the credit card companies do. So there's a good example of the topsy-turvy times we live in, that you got Tucker Carlson bonding with the head of the Teamsters about the banks and the criminal usury of the credit card companies. So there's a lot of that in there. But the thing that's getting the most attention is O'Brien spilling the tea about what things look like behind the scenes with the Democratic Party. And if you as a voter feel like they shit on you, well, don't feel bad. They shit on everybody.
Right.
It's not surprising what he's revealing. It's still a little shocking just in terms of their self-interest that they would carry themselves this way with people that they think they need, or they wouldn't be meeting with them, right? So why would you treat them this way? So here we go.
Schumer asked me to meet with him, and I meet with him, and he wants $550,000 for the super PAC for the Senate races. No problem.
This is Schumer.
Chuck Schumer asked me to meet with him, and I meet with him, and he wants $550,000 for the super PAC for the Senate races. No problem. And I said, look, I'm speaking at the RNC. He's like, oh, great job. That's good. You should represent your members. Day after I give that speech at the RNC, he gets on Twitter and starts talking shit about my speech. Remember who fixed your pensions? And I'm like, this guy's a fucking joke. Like, why would you do this? Two weeks prior, you're telling me when you're taking a $550,000 super PAC check, that's great. It's great for your members. That's good. And then you want to get on Twitter like a tough guy and, throw
Why
shit
didn't he
out
just
there.
call you?
Well, because they don't like confrontation. They don't want to hear the truth. When he said, we fixed your pensions, that gave me an opportunity to say, you're the same guy in the same party that 40 years ago embraced, endorsed, and signed off on deregulation in the trucking industry, which we lost 400,000 jobs in 1980. Ted Kennedy put the bill forward. Joe Biden signed off on it as a senator. He showed up at our building prior to the election, and we had a bipartisan meeting in the hallway of the IBT. Walks in late and he sticks his crooked finger in my face, and he says, "I fixed your pensions." I said, "You should have. You broke them." And we get into it pretty hard, and he starts like yelling at me. I go, "Buddy, listen. There's only one guy that can yell at me. We buried him 12 years ago." I go, "You want to get into this right here, right now? We'll get into it."
You're talking about your dad.
Yeah, I'm talking about my dad, right? And so Schumer's like, "We fixed your pension." I'm like, "Yeah? I'm going to name the things you haven't done for us. When our members were on strike at the rail, you didn't support us. You didn't put a letter of support in there. When we were fighting with UPS in the middle of the street, you wouldn't sign off on a support letter. When we took on Amazon, which we're taking on now, you wouldn't support our efforts in Amazon." I said, "You want me to keep going? Because you can tell me what you've done, the one thing you've done for me and my union and my members, but I'm going to tell you all the things you haven't done for us." And then, he's like, "Well, I really want this relationship." I'm like, "We're done. We're done." And that was it.
Okay, so that was quite the speech. He also mentions later on that he figured out why Schumer wouldn't support them on Amazon. I think he's got enough reasons not to anyway. Apparently, his daughter is a lobbyist for Amazon. Schumer's daughter is a lobbyist for Amazon. Well, of course it makes sense.
I think his daughter lobbying for Amazon is more a symptom of what the Democrats have become than a reason for Schumer to, not back them, right? I mean, and that conversation that he recounts there is a dramatized version. I mean, it's real. I'm not saying it's fake, but that is a dramatized sort of distillation of the relationship, the souring relationship between the unions and the Democratic Party going back as long as he said, deregulating trucking, 1980.
Right. The fact that they want to take credit for the crumbs, and that's very typical of the Democrats. Yeah, right. They'll throw you a few crumbs so that they can claim that they're standing up for you. They don't want to take any responsibility for the fact that they created those conditions in the first place.
Right.
A lot of people, when they've said to me over the years, "Why do you go so hard at the Democrats and not the Republicans?" I would very often say, I don't blame the wolf for blaming the wolf, for being a wolf. I blame the sheepdog that was supposed to be guarding the hen house for taking a bribe from the wolf and opening the door. Right. That is what the Democrats did to labor. Now, the fact that you've got Tucker Carlson, who we know has the ear of Trump, has a big impact on the MAGAverse. Having O'Brien on there, who he's very likable. He's really a throwback to these old school union leaders. Those voices have almost been entirely shut out of the public square. And it's very revealing that you're seeing a reemergence of this labor voice, not through the Democrats. through the Republicans. Can you imagine can you imagine Joy Reid bringing him on and having a sympathetic conversation like this with him? That in and of itself tells you the Democrats and the Republicans really have changed place, at least rhetorically. Now, what we got to see going forward, I'll take yes for an answer. I'm not going to sit there and say, these fucking Republicans. Hey, man, I hope they're as good as their word. I have my doubts. He says a lot of good things about what he got from Trump and the interactions that he's had with Trump. He talks about Josh Hawley having gone out on the picket line for the Teamsters after he spoke to him, told him that right to work isn't good for his unions. Okay, man. I mean, we've talked about this for a long time. I wrote a whole article about how it's possible that eventually the Republicans are going to feel like, well, our base is the old Democrat base. We can't just keep doing Reaganomics. They're not going to stand for it. We're not going to be able to keep them in our coalition. We'll see.
Right. And also, don't forget, O'Brien did not end up endorsing Trump. He shopped himself around to see where he could get potentially the best deal for his members. And that involved speaking at the RNC. He wanted to then speak at the DNC.
He still describes himself as a Democrat.
Yeah, they would not have him. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, he didn't support Donald Trump. He didn't back Donald Trump. He just realized that the relationship with the Democratic Party had become so toxic that he had to at least shop around. He couldn't just give them the endorsement the way so many of these unions just fall in line without even thinking about it. It's it's predetermined at the beginning of the cycle. It's just a matter of when they're going to make the official endorsement. And so he shopped himself around, and the Teamsters members, the rank and file, voted overwhelmingly to endorse Trump, and O'Brien still didn't do it. He just made no endorsement in the cycle. But the reason why he made no endorsement and the reason why he spoke at the RNC is because the relationship with the Democrats had become what he just described there. And that's only the first part of it. Wait till you hear about his interactions with the Kamala Harris campaign.
Yes. All right. So I've got a little piece in between. Him and Tucker, they talked a little bit about social issues, about how, O'Brien talks about, and he says, and this is where you can see he doesn't want to completely leave the Democrats. He says to Tucker, look, I understand the social issues are important. I probably agree more with you on a lot of those issues, but I understand they're important. But in the end, people are worried about how they're going to fill their gas tank. They're worried about food at the kitchen table, and these Democrats, he's talking mainly about the gentrification of Boston and how it's gone all blue. But what does it mean? Their idea of politics is all social issues. He's basically critiquing that whole liberal identity politics thing. But then he goes on to talk about what the Democratic Party is today.
This party, once you go against them, they get so vindictive. The Democrats now are acting the way that they used to accuse the Republicans 20 and 30 years ago. And they basically become that Republican Party that they despised.
Intolerant.
Fell in love with corporate elitists.
Well, I know.
Right? Don't want to listen to their constituents. They want to dictate how people should vote and how people should think. And that's a problem. But prior to Biden dropping out of the...
Okay, so it's very interesting to hear this from somebody who's the head of the largest union in the country, to describe himself basically being told to go get his fucking shine box, because as voters, we get that vibe, right? That's what we always talk about, that the Democrats just expect you to fall in line. They expect you to serve them. They don't see themselves as being obligated to serve you at this point. Which he says almost exactly that at one point in the interview. Now, this is the thing that's really gotten the attention, and there's a little clip of it floating around, but it's worth watching virtually in its entirety. This story about his interactions with the Harris campaign is really amazing. So he talks about how they could tell Biden was missing a step when they brought him in for this roundtable that all the candidates were invited to, where they asked them 16 questions. Biden answered 5 of them. He says it seemed like elder abuse that they were doing to him. It was obvious that he was not really fit to be in that position anymore. But then he goes on to talk about their interactions with Harris.
Race. He's in the race around June or May.
All right, so this is Biden is still the candidate at this point.
But prior to Biden dropping out of the race, he's in the race around June or May. One of my vice presidents, a woman named Joan Corey out of my local, she sits on our general executive board, was at an event with Vice President Harris. And, you know, they're going through the line to get the picture, and Joan introduces herself to Vice President Harris, says, I'm Joan Corey. I'm on the general executive board for the Teamsters. She goes, Teamsters? You better get on board. You better get on board. Better get on board soon. Says it to my vice president.
To her face?
To her face. So she comes back. We have the meeting the next day.
Damn.
And she tells me this.
I thought I was arrogant. That's really arrogant.
So she tells me this. So I call up Marty Walsh. He wasn't the Secretary of Labor, but, you know, he was pushing hard for us to make the endorsement. I'm like, let me ask you a question, Marty. Excuse my French. Who does this fucking lady think she is? Like, if I want to support from any organization, I am not going to point my finger in someone's face and say, you better get on board or else. But that's the attitude of this whole party. So fast forward, she finally agrees to come after we were putting pressure on her, you know, basically, because I was doing interviews all over the place saying, we haven't got invited to the DNC. You know, they haven't accepted our invitation for her to come to a roundtable, so she comes to the roundtable. Same format, same questions. Rank and file members are asking her questions just like they asked every other candidate. And they were trying to negotiate with us. She only wants to answer 3 questions. We're like, there's 16 questions here. So she answers 3 of them. And on the 4th question, one of her operatives or one of her staff slips a note in front of me. This will be the last question. And it was 20 minutes earlier than the time that it was going to end.
Come on.
100%. And so, you know, you're there trying to get our support. And her declaration on the way out was, I'm going to win with you or without you.
She thought that or said it out loud?
She said it out loud. The one difference between all the candidates that came was that at the conclusion of all these roundtables, we had media set up. So after conclusion of meeting with Trump, I did a press conference down in the lobby of my building. Well, Donald Trump did a press conference down in the lobby of my building after he spoke. The same offer was extended to both President Biden and Vice President Harris, and they refused. So you're meeting with the biggest labor organization that you want, and you've got an opportunity for media to question you about how you felt the meeting went and what you wanted to achieve, and you don't want to speak to the media. That's a problem. But Trump, to his credit, in our building, in our foyer, had a press conference.
I just want to issue one factual correction there because, you know, you got to be honest. When he says, she said, we're going to win with you or without you, the actual quote was, we're going to win with you or without you.
Yeah.
That was the actual quote. Maybe he was just editing for time.
Yeah, she ran a perfect campaign, though, right?
Yeah.
She ran a perfect campaign. This conforms to all the stories we've heard about Kamala Harris from people who are not Republican operatives, from people who had every reason not to come forward and describe her as a psychotic fucking maniac, Democratic operatives who resigned from her office. What, she lose her entire staff twice? Her entire staff twice resigned from her office? That doesn't just happen. We have
like 90% turnover, yeah.
Yeah, we have stories about when she was attorney general from the father of one of the interns that worked for her, that when she walked in, they were under orders to stand up and say good morning, General, and not make eye contact with her in the office. Now, hey, if you heard a story like that in isolation, you'd say that's crazy. But when you look at all of these stories from credible people about Kamala Harris, it seems like she is really just an unbelievably incompetent and unpleasant, to say the least, person with a level of arrogance that is hard to contemplate in anyone who's gotten this far in politics, because it seems like she just pisses off everyone that encounters her. It's like this high-handed way of dealing with people. That's the pattern that you see in all these stories. Now, you worked in the vice president's office. You have a vested interest in not coming out and telling the truth because you want to work again, right?
Right.
You don't tell those tales out of school. These people had no personal motive to attack Kamala Harris that way. The fact that so many of them were so disillusioned and disappointed by their work with her that they came out and told the press about it, by not anonymously. That tells you what you need to know. This just reconfirms that we, whatever you think about Trump, and I don't think much of him, we dodged a big bullet not having that woman in the White House. God knows what that would have been like.
Well, the real difference on display too in attitudes, not only to O'Brien, but that is reflective of Kamala's attitude towards everybody. She wanted Joe Rogan to come to her. She wouldn't go to him. Right. Trump goes to Texas.
She made them build a set for her for Call Me Daddy for $100,000 instead of just going to the set.
Yeah, Kamala and the Democrats acted like they didn't have time for anybody. And that's the big difference. Trump acted like he had time for everybody and really tried to get as many votes from as many disparate groups as he possibly could, whether it was the manosphere or the crypto people or the unions. I mean, he tried to get O'Brien's endorsement. He didn't get it, but he worked for it. He put in the time. He acted like he had time. And this is partly a function of the fact that Trump is just an animal. He's just a machine. He hardly ever sleeps, right? I mean, he just has a ton of energy for a guy his age especially, but he's always had that. Yeah. So it's partly he just has a lot of gas in that tank where he has 18 hours a day to deal with people, right? He's not like Biden who has to be asleep and takes a nap at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, right? That's a huge difference. The other difference is he took a much less arrogant approach to the campaign. He had time for people. He had 3 hours with Rogan. Kamala wouldn't do she was going to give him an hour if he came to her, right? Trump took a whole day. And this jibes with what people say about Trump, even people who hate his guts now. I remember Keith Olbermann.
He went to a rally late because of that Rogan interview. He was like 2 hours late.
Exactly. Right. He just had that time. He wanted to spend the time. Keith Olbermann said, when Keith Olbermann used to live in one of Trump's high-rises, I think he used to live in like the Upper West Side high-rises. Yeah. And Olbermann said, even after Trump ran for president, and Olbermann obviously did not support him, he said, I think it was on the Bill Maher show, I forget what interview he said, when I lived in the building, Trump knew I lived in the building, he knew I was a high-profile tenant, and he would ask me a lot. Was I happy with the building? Did I enjoy my time there? And he always had time for me. He never, it never seemed like he was blowing me off or listening with one ear. Like, he has interpersonal skills, and he actually pays attention to people when they talk. He's not just blocking them out, and that helped him tremendously this time. And, that was a strength that was the perfect foil to her weakness because she acted the exact opposite way. She didn't have time for anybody. She showed no respect to anybody. How you can tell the Teamsters we're going to win with or without you? All your polls say you're losing. All the polls say you're losing. Your internal polls showed you losing worse than the public polls. Amazing. Oh, yeah, we're going to win with or without you.
Yeah. Even before she was the candidate, that first interaction he's describing, she was still the vice president.
She's still the vice president.
You better get on board.
Yeah, you better get on board.
Who the fuck acts like that if you're in politics? See, this is the irony of it. Whatever you feel about Trump, we just did a story about him just laying on total counterfactual bullshit about the Panama Canal. Right, about how many do you say died?
38,000. Yeah,
total
versus
bullshit.
About 1,000. So
total
off by
bullshit,
a factor of almost 400%. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so but
4,000%.
Do I think, as the media will often portray him, that Donald Trump is a sociopathic person? No, he doesn't read to me that way. She always did. I've always said that about her. For as long as we've had the show, I have put forth the theory. I think she's a sociopath. Because her creepy, off-putting behavior is very typical of sociopaths. They can be very superficially charming, but then they'll say and do things that are off because they don't quite understand human emotion. They're faking it. They're faking an understanding of empathy. So they get it wrong sometimes. And that explains the right? It's just weird, laughing at these weird off moments, not really understanding. You don't do that. Come on, man. Let's call it for what it is. She fucked an old man who was married to get ahead. Right. That's a certain kind of person. Okay, right. That was how she got ahead in politics. Fucking Willie Brown, who was what, 60? She was in her mid-20s. I think he was 60, and he was married at the time. You're willing to, what? She was just drawn to Willie Brown? Come on, man. Like, if you're willing to do that to get ahead, what kind of a person are you? Now, it doesn't mean you're a sociopath per se, but I think when you put that together with all this weird behavior, it's just weird for someone in politics. Like, even if you're an unconscionable asshole, to not have the sense not to behave that way suggests a severe personality disorder to me. I think it's just beyond a bad politician. I think there's really, really something wrong with her. Now, again, I would really recommend watching this interview on the whole. O'Brien tells Tucker, I'm going to bring Jeff Bezos to his knees, which Tucker is very excited about. And he talks about how Bezos gets around paying the union or negotiating with the unions, the way they subcontract out the driving to third parties, but really they're clearly Amazon employees. All of this with Tucker's endorsement, no pushback. They seem to be on the same page, in agreement. O'Brien talks about how that labor pick, the labor secretary pick from Trump, was an example of him listening to him because that was who O'Brien wanted, and he told Trump that was who he wanted. So, hey, man, we're always fair on this show. I hope that his faith, I don't want to use the word faith, his hope that Trump will deliver for them. I honestly, from the bottom of my heart, I hope it works out that way. I always say this. Hey, I remember what it was like seeing myself as part of a political party, and okay, my belief that I had some kind of control over the system was an illusion, which I came to realize. It would be so much easier to have a political party that's actually responsive to the needs of labor than to go out and build a whole new party. We understand how difficult that is. It would be great if it works out this way. We're not like resistant to Trump doing that or just going to beat up on him because it's content. No way, man. He does that. No one will praise what he's doing, at least in that area, more than we will. I hope O'Brien's hopes are realized.
Yeah, well, I mean, Tucker had Chris Smalls on when he was trying to, organize the ALU way back. That was in 2021. And, I mean, look, there's a bit of a, just like there is with Rogan, there's a bit of a nod along, like I hear you and I agree with you, and then you look at the next day, he's speaking, to Trump rally
that's what I'm worried about.
Labor, right? Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
That is my concern, and frankly, if I had to bet, that's my expectation.
Right.
Because who was he just having dinner with?
Right.
Jeff Bezos.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So is he really going to turn around and cross Jeff Bezos for Sean O'Brien?
Right.
I'll believe it when I see it, but if it happens,
well, yeah, no axe to grind. Yeah, of course.
Sure. We will be the first to give him kudos for it. But it was very interesting just in terms of, because we're talking about how much negative influence you're getting from the way that the MAGAverse responds to people like Andreessen or people like Elon. It's nice to see Tucker, who has, I would say, at least as much influence with that crowd as Rogan does.
Oh, sure.
Sit down with Sean O'Brien and treat him with respect and promote his issues as legitimate. That's a hopeful thing to see.
Absolutely. I agree.
Little hope on this Christmas Eve.
Little hope on this Christmas. That's right. Lorian Brightbill, thanks for the $4.99 super sticker over on YouTube. Appreciate that. Mark Pugliese, thanks for the $10. Says Panama was part of Colombia. Colombia wanted too much money for the U.S., so they incited a secession movement in Panama, and when they seceded, it gave U.S. a sweetheart deal. Thank you, Mark Pugliese. Jonathan Bustamante says Colombia, the country, Colombia with a U, the city, they are not the same. That's correct. They are not the same. With the O is the country, with the U is the city and the college. Abiding The flaming women, neighbors ignoring the women raped in the 60s. Yeah, that is a very eerie image. It is a very dystopian, hellish image for sure. One more Christmas quatrain. Carmela's secret stash, bird feeder cash, no vig paid, Tony's wrath awaits silent streets. Conceal your fate.
Yeah, a lot of Sopranos references.
A lot of Sopranos references today. Psycho Kitty 666, thanks for the $10. That's kind of you. I'm so glad I discovered you two on Jimmy Dore. You both crack me up. Merry Christmas to both you and your families. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Hey, we're going to be back.
Yeah, we should announce that. We're going to be back hosting the Jimmy Show the second week of January into the 3rd, 6th, the 8th, the 10th, and the 13th. So we got 4 dates coming up on the Jimmy Show in January. Zen Saki, we really need to talk MMT. Whenever it comes up, I realize people have not understood the tiniest bit of it. Feels like the last frontier of the left to me.
Okay, you know what's funny? That was a big thing. We were going back and forth with MMT devotees, and I bought the Stephanie Kelton book, and that was September 2023. And guess what happened in October?
Yep.
And that was it. That was kind of the end.
Derailed it.
Having the time to really research MMT.
MMT is like the Gary Condit of the Do Dissidents podcast. You know, remember Gary Condit? He was all the news in August of 2001. Yep. And then remember what happened? Took him out of the news forever.
What happened to him again? What happened to him again?
That was the disappearance of the girl that they thought he killed or something, right?
Oh, is that it?
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. See, nobody remembers. Nobody remembers. That was a huge story until 9/11.
They memory hold them.
And 9/11, boom, that's it. That's it. It was a lucky day for him.
Like the Mandela effect.
Everyone was mourning that day except him. The good news is that Trump will destroy the United States faster than anyone else by isolating the country. Thank you, Kenman G. Nocturnal Human says, I thought you two weren't working today. You're disappointing Santa. Yeah, well, we're not working tomorrow. It's Christmas Eve, man. Christmas Eve. You can work during the day on Christmas Eve. You can't work at night.
We're not working Thursday.
And we're not working Thursday. That's right. So we are taking some
time off. That's going to be the first time we've had 4 days off since whenever. But, hey, it's looking more and more like I will go to China in the spring. So that will be the first time I've ever really been off. Because even when I took these trips, I still did the show.
Right.
I am not doing this show from China.
There you go. All right. Well, that's fine. I will hold down the fort.
I don't even know if it can be. I don't even know if you get StreamYard there.
I don't know. Yeah, that's something to think about. Hey, folks, if you want to have yourself a fun Christmas, why don't you binge watch the Hebe and Goy podcast, co-hosted by our friend Dan Richman. It's a great slice of life comedy podcast about one Hebe and one Goy bonding over their shared agony of the everyday human experience. I describe it as Seinfeld without the genocidal undertones. Co-hosted by our friend and supporter Dan Richman. You can go and sign up to listen to the podcast at hebeandgoy.com. That's A-N-D, hebeandgoy.com, where you can get the RSS feed to your audio player. Or, super simple, subscribe to their YouTube channel, Hebe and Goy. Put it in the YouTube search bar. It's a fantastic show, easy listening, apolitical fun. It's basically Russ and I's sense of humor without the dystopian news, right? It's like if all Russ and I did was talk shit, talk about our lives, this is basically what it would be. Now, we couldn't do a show like that if we wanted to because I don't really have much of a life. I don't really go anywhere. So you really can't get the Seinfeld version of this show with us. You got to go to hebeandgoy.com or YouTube search Hebe and Goy. Put it in YouTube and subscribe. All righty. What do we got here? Oh, yeah. Okay. This is a fun one. Wow. This is a hot one. All right, folks. So Candace Owens appeared on the Piers Morgan show and said, yes, Israel is conducting a Holocaust in Gaza. For the YouTube clip, I'll say in the first 15 seconds, I don't know if that flags it for any kind of scrutiny. Israel's up to something no good in Gaza, says Candace Owens. Piers Morgan starts quibbling with her over this, and this is the strongest I've seen from her, the most righteous I've seen from her in terms of an interaction with another person. So she cooks him pretty good. So bad metaphor to use when we're talking about the Holocaust. I guess so. She schools him. She owns him. There we go.
The larger discussion that's happening this The larger discussion that's happening right now is whether or not having survived a Holocaust gives you the permission to commit a Holocaust. And for whatever reason, people have been, what I would say, milking the Holocaust narrative in the same way that Black Americans were milking the slavery narrative and essentially saying, like, we lived through this and we survived this. And so now nobody can say that anything we do is wrong. And that's the big issue today, is that we have so many people that will not recognize that it is totally feasible that a Jewish person, and I'm speaking here about Bibi Netanyahu, could do something as horrific as what was done to the Jews throughout World War II or throughout history.
But is that an accurate comparison? I'll tell you why I say that. As we know, I mean,
because I want to keep my job.
Yes. Well, yes, it is an accurate comparison. And you notice Candace says there, she says, you're justifying doing something horrible to somebody else because something horrible was done to you.
Something horrible, right.
So she's not engaging in denialism. What she means by the narrative there is she means that never again applies to one race of people.
Everyone.
Right. Yeah. Well, she's saying never again.
Should apply to everyone.
Should apply to everyone. And in Israel's case, they see it only as applying to themselves. So here we go. He challenges her. He challenges her on this claim.
Throughout history.
But is that an accurate comparison? I'll tell you why I say that. As we know, I mean, whatever Dan Bilzerian wants people to believe, 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust. Another 6 million people were murdered by Hitler and the Nazis. The numbers of people being killed in Gaza are, in my view, have gone way beyond what is acceptable as a response to October the 7th. However, you're still talking about, at the moment, a death toll of under 50,000. There's no comparison in the amount of dead people compared to the Holocaust. So
okay, first of all, that's bullshit. It's not less than 50,000. How you could be sitting at this desk discussing this issue for the past 14 months and think the death toll is under 50,000 is astounding.
Yeah.
It was at 40,000 in January of this year, 1 year ago. We're 14 months into this now. Within 2 months, it was at 40,000, and then we stopped getting official counts because there was no infrastructure available to generate official counts. You mean to tell me only 10,000 have died this year? If 40,000 were killed in the first 2 months, you're telling me fewer than 10 were killed in the past 12? That makes no sense, number one. Number two, Gaza's a population of 2 million people. So you're comparing apples and oranges. You're saying, well, if 6 million were killed in the Holocaust, then how can you be saying this is a Holocaust when the numbers are different? Well, if everyone was killed in Gaza, it'd be 2 million. You can't get to 6 million. So first, and why are you litigating the number? Holocaust means death by fire. That's what it means. Death by fire. So firing a missile into a field hospital and burning the patients alive in the field hospital, that's a Holocaust. That's a Holocaust if it happens to 10 people, that's a Holocaust. It's happening to well over 50,000. Even if it was 40,000, it would be a Holocaust. That's not exaggeration at all.
Do they need to set up gas chambers for it to be analogous? Because it seems like that's what a lot of these people fall back on. Yeah. If it's not structurally and aesthetically exactly like Nazi Germany, it's not a Holocaust.
Yeah. No, it's just amazing. It's just amazing. Here, I'm going to look this up right now. Where is it? Here. Holocaust, a sacrifice in which the offering was burned completely at an altar, destruction or slaughter on a mass scale, especially caused by fire or nuclear war. That's the Google definition of a Holocaust. Death by fire. How many images have we seen? People engulfed in flame. So you tell me, what, you want to quibble? You want to talk semantics? You want to talk numbers?
And what was it? Was it Lancet that offered a report? And this
186,000.
Saying, right. So you got to be over 200,000 at this point easily.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say easily. Even if you don't believe the Lancet study, cut it in half. You can't say it's under 50. That's just ridiculous. Right. It was over 40 2 months in. Right. Yeah. We're at a year from the last official count. You can't say it's under 50.
Well, and this shows you what dishonest actors these people are, because Piers Morgan, he's not stupid.
No.
He knows that the number from last year is not relevant to the conversation.
This is what I mean. They're bad faith. I said this. I picked up on this immediately. Every conversation Piers would have about this, he acts as if it's the first one he's ever had.
Right.
So what's the point of bringing on Norm Finkelstein to talk about this if you're just going to act like you never heard it when you talk to the next guest? The point of being a journalist is to bring knowledge to the next conversation.
Not for these people.
Not for these people. Nope.
All
right. So
it's a product. It's a product. He's running a wrestling show.
Exactly. All right. Here she goes.
Do you understand why?
But it is a Holocaust, what's happening.
Well, is it though?
Yes.
Well, I think language is really important.
I think language is really important as well, and that's
people
why
say Holocaust.
Yeah, I think language is really important. That's why I just read you the definition: death by fire. Burning people alive means committing a Holocaust. Yeah, you're right. Language is important. She takes it from here.
Genocide.
I think what's happening is a Holocaust. The burning bodies of the children that I'm seeing every day, and we spoke about this on my show, but I have recognized that the ability to see this stuff every day has transformed my opinion. Maybe the numbers wouldn't have gotten so high if people had spoken up when it was happening at the very beginning during World War II. And so I want to use my platform to say that I believe that they are intentionally executing a Holocaust. I think Bibi Netanyahu, there's tons of evidence, and obviously the Western media is not reporting on this, but the corruption trials that are going on with Bibi Netanyahu pertaining to October 7th and him editing the transcripts and the prior knowledge that he knew is now becoming extremely pertinent. It is a question as to whether or not he allowed the attacks to take place, essentially to then be able to go in and to commit this Holocaust against the Palestinians. Now, based on everything that I've looked into and stuff that I had not seen before, because the Western media doesn't cover it, Bibi Netanyahu caught off camera speaking about how he had no intention of following the Abraham Accords and how he was going to get around it. He has, I believe, genocidal ambitions, and that's enough. We don't need to dispute, go backward or forward. Do I think Bibi Netanyahu has genocidal ambitions against the Palestinians? The answer is yes.
Boom.
Yep.
Boom.
Yep.
Mic drop. Well done.
Yep.
Well done. The fact that this is still quibbling 14 months later just shows you what a bad faith actor he is. And look at how easily she shut him down. And notice he didn't cut her off during any of that. He didn't cut her off. He couldn't stop her. He couldn't stop her.
Well, I'm a little surprised at Candace just accepting the narrative that the Nazis committed a Holocaust. I didn't know she was such a post-war consensus fanatic.
Yeah, post-war consensus fanatic. Well, that's the thing.
I had no idea. She needs to sit down with Daryl.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. She says there, hey, if people had spoken up earlier during the Nazi Holocaust of the Jews, you could have, if not prevented it outright, you could have mitigated it. You could have intervened sooner. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing now. And, there is a sort of spectrum of...
Now that's a checkmate kind of a move with those people.
Well, yeah, of course.
It's very hard for them to argue with that.
Of course. And she's one of the only people on the right who goes there. I talked about this when we interviewed Greenwald over a year ago now. There's like a spectrum of right-wing takes on Israel. There's the Shapiro take, which we all know. There's the Candace Owens take, which we all know. And then I would say most of like the online right, like our peers who are kind of right of center, are more in the Tucker lane, which is what's in it for us to support Israel? Right. Why do we do it?
Isolationist argument.
Right. They have a certain skepticism about our involvement and Israeli influence on our politics, but they don't express that kind of well-placed, in my view, obviously, righteous anger about the immorality of the Israeli state the way she does. She's one of the only people on the right who does that, by far the most prominent. And that's why the rift happened at Daily Wire, because to think that she, used to work for these people, we covered a video a couple weeks ago where she said, "I'm ashamed to have ever known them. I'm ashamed to have ever known them."
And this is where I say, at the end of the day, look at Candace's numbers. Most of the people in that lane, the actual listeners, the actual viewers of these podcasts, are not siding with Israel.
Right.
You dropped that Rescue the Republic clip where I interviewed some of the MAGA for Palestine people. Yeah, some people in the comments who were like, "I've never seen these people." If you've never seen these people, then you haven't gone to any MAGA events.
Right.
Most of the people that when I go to a MAGA event, very often you'll have in the New York area, you'll have the Hasidic Jews there holding up the flag. You look at how people around them are reacting to it. It's like, what are you going to do? The boss is inviting these people. I'd rather they weren't here. That's the vibe you get from them, man. You don't see people like, "Yeah, fucking Israel."
Right.
You don't see that, man. It's like, because Trump talks it up, they tolerate it. That's a vibe you get. They tolerate it, but they don't like it.
No, her USS Liberty interview has 5.1 million views on YouTube. 5 million.
And that is one of the areas where Trump and his whole team are just completely at odds with their own base. It will be interesting to see how this plays out. In the previous segment, we covered the O'Brien interview. O'Brien's talking about how he's going to bring Jeff Bezos to his knees. Trump's having dinner with Jeff Bezos at Mar-a-Lago the other night. Right. How does all this play out? Where does Trump land? Most of his base does not like these wars in Israel. Is he just going to continue? And does that impact people's perception of him? Or are they just resigned that they're going to accept it and the Palestinians are a chip they're willing to throw on the table to get other things? I mean, it kind of seems that way, given that so many people who absolutely felt that the support for Israel was disqualifying when it was coming from the Biden-Harris administration are cheering on people like Tulsi Gabbard, who are just as fanatical as anyone in the Biden administration.
Right. Indeed. Hey, we got 2000. Thank you.
Good house on Christmas Eve.
Good house on Christmas Eve. 2,000 strong in the YouTube chat. 1,200 over on Rumble. Please smash that like button. Please smash that subscribe button on YouTube. That follow button over on Rumble. We got Moose World. Thanks for the $1.99 over on YouTube. Kamala has so many similarities to Patrick Bateman. There you go. Thank you, Moose World. Randy Kagan says, thanks for the Christmas show, guys. I've got a suggestion for your movie club, The Killing Floor, directed by Bill Duke. I have not seen that one. I have not seen that
I got to decide. When are we doing movie night? Monday? Saturday?
Yeah, we got to pick one. So we'll have the movie. We'll name it on Sunday, on the Sunday show.
Yeah.
Yep. So, but yeah, the movie night will be Monday the 30th, so 1 week from yesterday. All right, what do we got here? America is a scumbag, douchebag empire, says Eric Russo. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Ken Minji says, Bernie is such a sellout. I think the establishment would have worked well with him without the, that's what you said there. Yeah. I tend to think you're right. I think he'd have been like, they want to attack Panama. I guess we're going to have to do that. It is outrageous. We are being charged outrageous prices for crossing the Panama Canal. You owe it to us.
Children are going hungry because of the price of lettuce.
You would still be a Colombia were it not for us and our 58,000 workers who died building it.
I think, look, in the end, whatever you think about whether they would have strong-armed Bernie and he would have given in, the kind of conversations that a Bernie presidency would stimulate, and the kind of ideas that would be the topic of conversation in the mainstream, they could not have that. Right. With Trump, what? You got people screaming about illusory deaths of Americans who built the Panama Canal. They're very happy with that.
Right.
That they can work with.
Yes. Yes. Good point, Charles. Happy Christmas, everyone, says Michael Zemrowski. Thanks for the €5. For those thinking of checking out tonight, don't. All righty. Thank you. Appreciate that very much. All right, we'll take some more Rumble rants and Super Chats as the show progresses. But hey, here's kind of a feel-good Christmas story. Not a feel-good Christmas story, but here's something we should remind you of this Christmas is that
Apple is being sued. Ah, yeah. That's the feel-good story of the year.
Yeah.
Although not really, given what.
No, I shouldn't say it's feel good, but it's they had it coming. It's justice of a sort. Yes.
Yeah. That's interesting. Apple is like the one company that seems to stay out of the fray politically.
Right.
You don't see Tim Cook running down to Mar-a-Lago.
Right.
But at the same time, you really didn't see him going to a Harris fundraiser either.
No.
They just kind of stay out of it.
No, they do things very simply. They don't discount their products. That's part. I did actually when I was getting an economics degree, which I never finished. I did a report on Apple, and part of their business strategy is just very, very simple. We have a limited product line. We charge what we charge. No sales, no discounts, no this, no that. And that's it. And that reflects in their relatively apolitical presence.
Well, I think it's also they feel like their market position is secure,
right?
And they don't need to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're doing our experiments with AI over here, and we'll work that out on our own.
I've been buying Apple for so many years because the shit never breaks. It never breaks. I mean, just I've never had a problem ever with any one of their products.
I mean,
Literally never.
the iPhones break.
Well,
The
I
iPhone-
mean,
the
you beat the shit
iPhones-
out of a phone for a few years, it's going to start tiring out. But like,
You don't have to beat the shit out of it. After a couple of years, the battery life is so bad.
well, the battery
you know,
goes,
it's-
yeah. But the batteries go on every phone. You know, I have 2 MacBook Pros now that I'm using. Now I got these cheap used secondhand, obviously. One of them is like a 2014, one of them is a 2019. They both work good as new.
Well, congratulations on your fucking conflict minerals, Keith.
Yeah, well, that's as I realize, we probably shouldn't start this segment with a commercial for Apple.
Plugging Apple.
Testimonials for Apple. Yeah.
You can almost smell the tears in the circuit boards.
Yeah, exactly. Now, having said all that,
yes,
right.
So Apple accused of using conflict minerals. The Democratic Republic of Congo has filed criminal complaints in France and Belgium against subsidiaries of the tech giant Apple, accusing it of using conflict minerals. Acting on behalf of the Congolese government, lawyers have argued that Apple is complicit in crimes committed by armed groups that control some of the mines in the east of DR Congo. Apple has said it strongly disputes the claims and that it is deeply committed to responsible sourcing of minerals. The authorities in France and Belgium will now look at whether there is enough evidence to take the legal action further. In a statement, the lawyers for the DR Congo talked about Apple's supply chain being contaminated with blood minerals. They alleged that the tin, tantalum, and tungsten is taken from conflict areas and then laundered through the international supply chains. These activities have fueled a cycle of violence and conflict by financing militias and terrorist groups and have contributed to forced child labor and environmental devastation. Apple rejected the accusations, saying it holds its suppliers to the highest standards in the industry. A spokesman told the BBC, quote, "As conflict in the region escalated earlier this year, we notified our suppliers that their smelters and refiners must suspend sourcing tin, tantalum, tungsten, and gold from the DRC and Rwanda. We took this action because we were concerned it was no longer possible for independent auditors or industry certification mechanisms to perform the due diligence required to meet our high standards," unquote. The east of DR Congo is a major source of minerals, and the global thirst for them has fueled war there for decades. Rights groups have long alleged that large quantities of minerals from legitimate mines, as well as from facilities run by armed groups, are transported to neighboring Rwanda and end up in our phones and computers. Rwanda has in the past described the Congolese government's legal action against Apple as a media stunt. It has denied selling any conflict minerals to the tech company. Now, we did a story a few months ago about Sudan, which had similar elements, arguing that in the civil war in Sudan, a lot of these minerals were being extracted and then kind of laundered through the international supply chain, where then companies like Apple, and Apple was specifically mentioned in some of the research we did, can say, no, it didn't actually come from the conflict zone. They just launder it and have it come out of country that's approved for export. So yeah, that's another element in this region. Sudan specifically, again, very similar situation. It was on the list of the 7 countries that Wesley Clark mentioned, and we talk about it as part of the Zionist project. But this is an element that's not as often discussed, that destabilizing these countries and keeping them poor is in the interest of our manufacturing, because we're able to keep the prices from being what these minerals are really worth. I mean, the same reason we destabilize the Middle East, so that we can have more control over the manufacture of oil and the distribution of oil. Same thing in these countries. We do not want them to have strong, stable governments that can then extract a fair price for their much needed resources. As long as you keep it destabilized and constantly in a state of civil war and corruption, you can get all these minerals for a song just for paying a pittance to these rebel groups to keep these areas destabilized. Your mic's off.
Sorry, I muted myself because I had a mini coughing fit. But yeah, no, I mean the more infrastructure a country builds up, the more it can protect its own resources. Obviously, Libya was the most developed country in Africa. They had the highest development score in Africa. Did we celebrate that? No. Just the opposite. Just the opposite. South America, same thing. Cuba, same thing. We would get their exports, very, very cheap when they were ruled by, someone who played ball with us. Now, in that example, you weren't dealing with militias and rebel groups. You were dealing with puppet governments. So those are the two options, right? We either want to install a puppet who will basically sell out their workers to the United States, or just destabilize these countries entirely to the point where, you could pay what's nothing to you, which is a fortune, to these groups, because if there's no infrastructure, then everything is cheap. Then everything comes cheap, including human labor, and in the most dramatic and hellish examples, human life. I mean, you see, the horrible conditions. We showed this in a video in a previous segment that we did about Congo. The horrible conditions of workers in these mines. You would think that was repurposed black and white footage from the transatlantic slave trade.
Unimaginable.
You would think that
child labor.
Yeah.
The children running back and forth with the equipment in pouring rain and pollution. Just unbelievable degradation and deprivation.
What do you think video of the transatlantic slave trade would look like if we had it back then? It would look exactly like that.
Oh, and then they're going to go out there in the media and they're going to blame the victims. They're going to talk. This is where there is an inherent. We're going to talk a little bit about the Luigione so white thing a little later on, and that really gets into how the media covers white criminals, according to some. Where you really see racism in media coverage is the way they cover the political situations in these countries without ever mentioning our hand in destabilizing their countries. There's an inherent racist assumption. These people just can't get their act together.
Right. Exactly.
No, there's no reason behind that. They're just they don't say it, but the underlying implication is they're backward. Right?
Exactly.
They're backward. They're flawed. They don't know how to govern themselves. They're never going to tell you on CNN, well, what does the CIA do in this region?
Exactly. Indeed. Ravid Laz says, speaking of Central America, did you guys see the raid on the human trafficking ring run by Hasidim Lev Tahor in Guatemala? They rescued 160 minors. No, I did not see that.
I didn't see that.
Did not see that. Love those O'Brien clips, says Hillary Hinton. I really hope he's a good faith actor and doesn't accidentally pick the wrong moment to cross the train tracks like El Duce did. I think O'Brien did what he thought he had to do, which was, just make a break from the Democratic Party. I mean, did he, is it great to, go to the RNC and say, you say what you want about Trump, he's got balls. Are you doing a little manufacturing consent? Well, yes and no. I mean, it's tough to say. I mean, his job is to represent his members. His job is to get the best deal that he can for his members. So he's shopping around a little bit. He's not a politician. He's an advocate for his members. So he's got to work with what he sees.
Right. Yeah, he's a good natural politician. He's got good instincts.
He does. That he does. JustLeafKratom.com says, Merry Christmas, you scumbag douchebags. Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
I was going to mention, because some people are recommending books, I just ordered Cobalt Red, which when I did the Sudan segment, people were recommending. I think that's specifically about the Congo. I've got it now, so I'm going to try to read that soon.
All righty. Well, folks, Russ and I both have some coffee with us today. So let's tell you a little bit about Rumble 1775 coffee. Do you enjoy the free speech that Rumble is protecting and fighting for? Well, our show on Rumble is only possible thanks to viewers supporting Rumble's platform by buying Rumble's products. Most of you drink coffee every day, and that's why you got to try Rumble's 1775 coffee. Some of the best coffee out there. It's the same price as the coffee you buy now, but it's way better, and it comes in 16-ounce bags as opposed to those 10 to 12-ounce bags that you get at the supermarket. Rumble's 1775 coffee is free from chemicals, yet rich in flavor. This is because their beans are sourced from high-altitude farms in Bolivia, handpicked, roasted weekly at their facility in Miami, and delivered fresh to your doorstep. And as believers in freedom, buying from Rumble helps fight back against censorious corporations like Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts. So join the coffee revolution and brew rebellion with Rumble 1775 coffee. So go to 1775coffee.com, use coupon code STUDIO, and get a free month supply of their cognitive boosting supplement Limitless when you buy 2 bags of their coffee. New Year's coming up. Make one of your New Year's resolutions to get smart. Get some of that Limitless cognitive boosting supplement. It's a good deal. The supplement's worth more than the 2 bags of coffee. So 1775coffee.com and try their amazing coffee today. All righty. Beautiful. All right. So what do we got now? Let's see. We got Michael Castillo over on YouTube. Hey, Michael. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Michael.
Good afternoon, Michael. Russell, I think your British accent's pretty spot on. You would be a perfect Sebastian Gorka. There you go. Nice compliment from Michael Castillo.
That's not what the British say.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. We will move on.
Whenever I did Australia, my wife used to tell me I sounded like a pirate.
Oh, yeah? Is that right?
Yeah.
All right, folks. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about Luigi Mangione. The timing just didn't coordinate correctly for us to cover this as its own segment, but just to refresh your memory here, we're going to show a little bit of his now infamous perp walk, which was on the 19th. So here is Luigi landing in New York City. Of course, they made a big spectacle of his perp walk, which they do for propaganda purposes. Look at all of those police surrounding him.
Yeah,
Even
you really need all those people to hold back the prep school kid.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So
you might go all Hannibal Lecter.
There you have that. And the spectacle made of that perp walk was the subject, one of the subjects, of Mangione's lawyer when she appeared before the court. Sabby Sabs, our friend Sabby, says Luigi's attorney calls out government officials and ridiculous perp walk as he pleads not guilty.
About my client's right to, very concerned about my client's right to a fair trial. In this case, he's being prejudiced by some statements that are being made by government officials. Like every other defendant, he is entitled to a presumption of innocence. But unfortunately, the way this has been handled so far, his rights are being violated. And as you know, Your Honor, there's a wealth of case law guaranteeing his right to a fair trial.
I'll tell you what it is. It's anti-Italian discrimination.
That's right. That's right. That's right, folks.
But none of the safeguards have been put in place yet here. In fact, it's just the opposite of what's been happening. He's a young man, and he is being treated like a human ping pong ball between 2 warring jurisdictions here. These federal and state prosecutors are coordinating with one another, but at the expense of him. They have conflicting theories in their indictments, and they are literally treating him like he is like some sort of political fodder, like some sort of spectacle. He was on display for everyone to see in the biggest staged perp walk I've ever seen in my career. It was absolutely unnecessary. He's been cooperative with law enforcement. He had been in custody for over a week. He waived extradition. He was cooperative at all accounts. There was no reason for the NYPD and everybody to have these big assault rifles that, frankly, I had no idea it was in their arsenal. And to have all of the press there, the media there, it was like perfectly choreographed. And what was the New York City mayor doing at this press conference, Your Honor? That just made it utterly political. And as Your Honor knows, under Lauro v. Charles, the Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit has held it to be clearly established that these staged perp walks to the media unrelated to a legitimate law enforcement objective is unconstitutional. And I submit there was zero law enforcement objective to do that sort of perp walk.
Okay, so also, in addition to that, and I would have pulled up a photo.
She's good, this one. She's good.
Yeah. I would have pulled up a photo. Adams himself was actually part of the perp walk. He actually got in on the action of the perp walk, actually joined the cops. So this is all creating questions about the feasibility of doing this trial. In addition to the political spectacle of the perp walk and Adams' public remarks about this very public case, you also have Ken Klippenstein uncover that Luigi Mangione, judge, married to former healthcare executive. That's right. Magistrate Judge Catherine H. Parker, who is overseeing pretrial hearings for Luigi Mangione, is married to a former Pfizer executive and holds hundreds of thousands of dollars in stock, including healthcare companies and pharmaceutical companies, according to her 2023 financial disclosures. The judge's ties to the healthcare business are a stark reminder of how pervasive the for-profit industry is in American life, a point made by Mangione himself. Parker's husband, Brett Parker, left Pfizer in 2010, where he served as vice president and assistant general counsel after holding the same titles at Wyeth, a pharmaceutical manufacturer purchased by Pfizer. According to Parker's disclosures, her husband Brett still collects a pension from his time at Pfizer in the form of a senior executive retirement plan, or SERP. So there it is. No doxing on Ken Klippenstein's part there. Those are public records there. Those are his financial disclosures. So you can see the proof there, the documentation. Pfizer, the largest pharmaceutical company by revenue, $58.5 billion in 2023, is known for manufacturing the COVID-19 vaccine. The company has also had its share of controversies, including paying out hundreds of millions of dollars to settle multiple illegal marketing accusations. Pfizer spends millions on grants and research funds to universities researching everything from heart disease to emerging mRNA applications. Judge Parker holds between $50,000 and $100,000 in Pfizer. Okay, so this just shows the sort of incestuous relationship between all these corporate interests and the law, the institutions of law and order and law enforcement in this great free nation of ours. Also, there is the question being raised of this. Legal analyst on potential jury nullification in a Mangione case. So jury nullification is what a lot of people argue happens in the O.J. Simpson trial, which is the jury kind of suspected he was guilty, but they didn't care because they thought they had other motives in mind, and so they voted not guilty anyway. So now we're going to hear from a legal analyst on the possibility of such a phenomenon grabbing control of this case.
Joey, I want to pick up on something we spoke about yesterday when discussing this Mangione case, and that is the idea of jury nullification being a potential factor. That is, the jury essentially deciding that this person may have committed the act that they're accused of, but that on the greater whole, it would be unjust for them to face a sentence effectively. And you can correct me if I'm misrepresenting jury nullification, but I wonder how that now potentially applies to federal charges.
Yeah, Boris, indeed. I mean, I think most people would be screaming at the screen, and probably are, right? And saying, jury nullification, what are you talking about? He's guilty. Look at this evidence. Look, have you not seen the criminal complaint here in federal court where it lays out chapter and verse? He's on his bicycle. It talks about the manifesto. It talks about to the feds. He's guilty even looking at this. Not so fast. Obviously, you have the presumption of innocence. However, from all public indications, the evidence is really strong.
I don't think the evidence is all that strong. Russell, do you? I don't think it's strong at all.
You know, it's strong like the evidence on Lee Harvey Oswald.
I mean, I don't think it's strong. I mean, you say it's strong. I don't see that at all. I see a guy. You want me to believe that a guy who was smart enough to execute this crime and escape Manhattan Island, an island with limited entry and exit points.
I'm probably being surveilled right now.
Yeah, exactly. You want me to think that a guy who had the wherewithal to do this and then escape an island with a very limited number of entry and exit points was also dumb enough to keep the murder weapon on him and keep his manifesto on him. So I don't think that's very strong evidence at all. I don't think the state has much of a case here. I think the evidence is weak. That's my opinion.
All it takes
now,
is
listen,
one.
You're right. And listen, as someone who really believes, look, I am as heartbroken at this tragic crime as anyone. I'm just as heartbroken as the average person. I'm no more heartbroken or less heartbroken. I am as heartbroken as the average American about this crime. And so I want to see justice done. I want to see the perpetrator brought to justice. But I'm sorry, the evidence seems weak to me. This looks like a setup to me. This looks like he's being framed. Because how could a person smart enough to do this be stupid enough to carry the murder weapon on him and carry the manifesto on him? So I would push back on that. I don't think the evidence is all that strong. In fact, I think the state has a pretty weak case.
Yeah, it's a frame up.
Yeah, it's a frame up. It's a frame up. That's what we think. Prove we don't.
Yep.
The reason we're here talking
one
about
person on that jury who agrees with us.
Right. Exactly.
And try finding 12 people in New York or in America where you're not going to get one person who sees clearly this is a setup.
Right. That's reasonable doubt. It's reasonable doubt. You can't tell me that's not reasonable doubt. Sure. What, the guy did this and got away, so he was cunning enough to do that, but he didn't have the smarts to discard the murder weapon? That seems like reasonable doubt to me. Seems like reasonable doubt to me.
He's just trying to enjoy his McNuggets.
Yeah.
And they grabbed him.
Yep. Seems like a real setup to me. As someone who wants to see justice done, like I want to see the perpetrator apprehended and brought to justice because this is a horrible crime. I just don't think you got the right guy. I don't think there's the right guy. I think there's reasonable doubt.
I don't even think he was in the McDonald's.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
A guy this into his health.
Yeah.
Would be sitting in there eating that food. I don't buy it.
Yeah. Yep. Something's fishy about it. All we're saying is there's doubt here, folks. There's reasonable doubt. There's reasonable doubt.
However, from all public indications, the evidence is really strong. The reason we're here talking about, at least, you raise the issue of jury nullification, is we've seen social media. I have never, right, and I'd be curious to know if Ellie has ever seen a case like this where social media really is calling him a hero. That's something to look for with regard to a hung jury, with regard to a jury that nullifies. I don't know that they will, but if ever there was a case, right, where it would be a jury that would nullify, and last point, look at the last election. The public has spoken with regard to what they feel about the government, with regard to what they feel about the country, and the direction it's heading, the distrust of government, just the feelings overall about politics. They wanted someone in the office who could just be a norm breaker. I'm looking for that as it relates to this case, to be sure.
So,
right, you are, sir.
You got a lot of factors here. It's a complicated case, Maud. A lot of ins and outs, a lot of what have yous. You got the perp walk and the spectacle and his lawyer arguing that this is unfair from the start. Then you have, obviously, the conflicts of the judge. Then you have the possibility of jury nullification. Before you get to jury nullification, you have to ask yourself, how did a guy smart enough to do this keep the murder weapon on him? That's reasonable doubt in the case.
Yep.
That means you have a weak case. So when you add all of these things together, what is the feasibility of this trial? How are you going to have a fair trial? How is the trial going to be covered? What is the response going to be to this trial? Like this is going to be this is going to capture the news cycle again in a huge way as this trial unfolds. What you're seeing a lot of public sentiment directed at this guy, and how are you going to get a jury of 12 unbiased people? And how are you going to get a jury of 12 unbiased people who don't ask the reasonable question that I'm asking, which is, how does the perpetrator execute a crime like that, escape, but not discard the murder weapon? Smells like a setup to me. How do you convince 12 people it wasn't? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, the lawyer's only job is to give the jury a way to claim reasonable doubt. That's all she has to do.
Yeah.
And you've laid out some probable courses that they could take in that direction. This is going to be like trying Robin Hood.
Right.
This is going to be like the sheriff of Nottingham tries to get 12 people in the village to vote against Robin Hood.
Right.
I don't see how you're going to get 12 people to vote against him. It is an incredible example of how much people have given up on their institutions, that this guy is a folk hero. He's and even if you get 10 of them are CNN watching establishment kind of people, Michael Savage fans, we'll see a little bit of that in my segment. All you need is one. All you need is two. And I think you get at least two on any jury that you try to empanel. Yeah, you're going to get these people who take their direction from the judge and try to play it down the middle. All you need is one.
That's right. That's right. It is a real question, just like the OJ trial. There were people on that jury. The assumption was that they were going to vote not guilty no matter what. They got onto the jury. Yeah, you have to interview jurors. You have to approve jurors. He talks about that. I forget this guy's name. What's this guy's name? Whoever that is on CNN here. Eli Honig. Or no, that's the other guy. Sorry. I don't know this guy's name. Anyway, whatever his name is. He said, you interview jurors, you select jurors, but, you don't always pick up on their every bias. People are people. People have biases that are not.
And in a case like this, if you want to hang that jury, you'd lie about it.
Well, that's the other thing.
If you went in wanting to hang this jury, you would just say, yeah, no, I could find him guilty.
Yeah.
Depends on the evidence.
Yeah. Now, sometimes what they'll do, they do vet jurors. I've been called in for jury duty. They vet the jurors. If they don't have a public profile, then it's very difficult to get inside their head and see what they're thinking. And so, that is going to be something to look for. It is going to be fascinating to see how
it's going to be the biggest trial since OJ, I would say.
Absolutely.
Easily. It's going to be the first trial to really capture the public imagination in that way. And for similar reasons, and going with the OJ trial comparison, very similarly, the reason you got jury nullification was not because that jury thought he didn't do it, but because for the black community, fuck it.
Right.
Fuck it. You got a racist cop. We all deal with racist cops. I don't care that he did it. Fuck it. I'm going to vote against the system. Very similar vibe, only now you're talking about something that's not confined to the black community. You're talking about something there were endless news reports at the time of the OJ verdict that showed white people sitting there when the verdict was announced, being like, and black people celebrating.
Yep.
Now you've got something that affects everyone in society, where the only people who are going to be the white people in the OJ case are going to be the media. They're the ones who are going to be sitting there going,
right. They're going to be the white people. Right. Yes, exactly. And I mean, I don't know that it was needed in the OJ case, but Cochran pulled a tremendously.
It does not fit. You must acquit.
Well, that wasn't even the smartest thing he did in that. I mean, that was one of them. But one of the real boss moves he made was when they had the racist guy there, Furman, who was on tape using the N-word.
Yeah.
They were grilling him on the stand, and it was clear the guy wasn't going to answer any question. He just pled the fifth in every single one. Every single question they asked, he said, I, reserve my right to not answer the question. So Cochran thinks to himself, what's a question I can ask him that if he doesn't answer is going to create reasonable doubt? And he goes up and he asks him, did you tamper with any of this evidence? Did you manipulate the evidence? And Furman doesn't say no. He says, I'm not answering that. There you have it.
Right.
He put a reasonable doubt in people's minds. Even I'm not saying they needed it, but he figured the master chess player that he was, he's like, what's a question I can, if I know he's not answering any question, I have to figure out what's the question I can ask him that will put reasonable doubt in the minds of the jurors. Well, did you manipulate the evidence? He's not denying it. He's not saying you didn't manipulate evidence. So therefore, there's now reasonable doubt in this case because he will not say conclusively he did not manipulate evidence, which means everything you see, you have to take with a little grain of salt because here we got the cop saying in court, he's declining to answer the question, did you fuck with the evidence?
Right. Exactly.
So that's what it takes. All right. We can go right into the B part and then we'll take some super chats and then we'll do our last piece.
All right. So let me get set up here. All right. So the cultural element of this has been really the most fascinating case since OJ. Now, if there has ever been a case that shows you that the anti-woke and the woke serve the same masters. It has been this case. It was the right-wing commentators and podcasters who came out first with their takes on Luigi to get everybody back inside the corral on this. Oh, this privileged kid. You had Matt Walsh. The left is outright praising the first-degree murder of a health insurance CEO because he's a white male. If he was the CEO of the same company but was a black woman, you would not be seeing any of the gloating and celebration. I hope everyone understands this basic point. So it's interesting because it's supposed to be the left, so-called left, the liberals, who make everything about race, but these guys make everything about race. They're just making it about a different race. They still want the conversation to be about race.
And notice. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but notice you never really hear white people get called race hustlers, do you? You only hear black people get called race hustlers.
No. And here's a friend of show, Michael Savage. Another spoiled bastard. Another anti-capitalist loser. Mangione is originally from Towson, Maryland, and is an anti-capitalist who attended Baltimore's elite $40,000 a year Gilman School. All right, so ginning up the class resentment in the audience, and Michael Savage would be perfectly happy to take Mark Andreessen's shaft down to the balls any day of the week.
Degenerate and sick.
Yeah, but he all of a sudden he's a class warrior when it's convenient. And then we showed this before. I've just been informed the usual suspects overplayed their hand. Both Ben Shapiro and Matt Walsh got ratioed on their videos, trying to get everyone in the corral hating Luigi Mangione and mourning the death of a health insurance CEO who was being investigated for insider trading by the Justice Department at the time that he so tragically slipped on a banana peel. So it took a little while. They were first out of the gate with a response. Barry Weiss here, predictably. It took a little while for the left because more of their coalition is obviously going to be sympathetic. Although, as those ratios demonstrate, the supposed right-wingers, the MAGA people, were very sympathetic to Luigi on the whole, too. But for the left, it's a little more complicated in terms of constructing a narrative because they can't really construct the CEOs or people to narrative. That doesn't work for their brand. But they went to their go-to. They went to their version of the race hustle. Okay, you're going to have to cut this in. I totally forgot to put it in the videos today. Give me 1 second. You know what? Go to Super Chats. It's going to take a second. I forgot I have videos in this.
All right. We will take a quick break here. Henry DeShazo, jury nullification vid CGP Gray, get familiar NYC. I saw some videos. I was looking up some videos on YouTube about that. And so I don't know, is that a recommendation? I will check that out. Thank you for that, though. Appreciate that very much. Let's see what we got here. Shady Deals, Canadian Psycho, Freedom. Thank you, Shady Deals. Appreciate that very much. Furrow Screen, Fire Dancer. Today has been brought to you by the letters F-U-C-K and the numbers O-F-F. Never underestimate the stupidity of the public. Jesus Christ. Glad to catch this to cheer me up, believe it or not. Thank you, Furrow Screen. Appreciate that.
Okay, that was the only one.
It's the only one? Okay, good.
Oh yeah, I just want to make sure so I don't have to stop us again. Okay, so Michael Harriot, he is kind of the race hustler in residence at CNN. I would have used this.
White guy, we say.
I would have used this the other day. They did an amazing panel about the Wall Street Journal article about Joe Biden's senility, where he was the only one who tried to come up with a defense. He tried to pull yes, but the Democratic Party, after the debate, they have accountability. So they took him out when they saw that there was a problem. He was the only, even the other Democrats on the panel were not whorish enough to go there. So here's his little contribution to the race hustle.
It's a white guy we search for a reason and valorize him and make him a hero when he's just a violent criminal who did a violent thing. He's a thug.
We
he's
a
a thug.
to make him a folk hero.
Thank you.
The left is searching for a reason to make him a folk
You think
hero.
it's a left thing?
Joe Rogan thinks he's
when
a
I see
Joe Rogan never
Democratic
even said that.
politicians
God,
do the perfunctory.
so
Well, violence
obsessed
is
with
never
him.
the answer. But you can see why people are mad. Yes, I believe people on the left, and you see it online, they are searching for a reason and want to turn this person in, and they want to into a folk, and they want to justify violence to change a system they don't like. And
your ability to shovel right-wing junk into a funnel and make it into something that is crazy.
I
but
just want to show.
it's not right-wing.
We are showing the signs. I mean, this was today, okay?
Maybe that's a MAGA person.
Does this look like a MAGA?
Could
Does this
be.
look like a MAGA rally?
I haven't seen a MAGA person wearing a mask in 3 years.
All right, so that panel really shows you how both sides funnel you in the same direction. They're not fighting over what the meaning of this killing is in terms of our healthcare system, why people are so supportive of this guy in the face of how much they've been victimized by these health insurance companies. They turn it into a fight about race and over which section of the duopoly is celebrating him.
Right.
That's what they turn it into.
Right. They're trying to pin the wrong side of the argument on the other side.
On the other side.
Oh, no,
exactly.
It's not us saying that. That's them saying that.
Right. But the discussion of what this really means in terms of how much people hate these insurance companies and what Brian Thompson really represented in our system, that conversation they're not going to have. But this is really the takeaway. It's two sides of the same grift. Jennings, Harriet, they're part of the same grift. It's two sides of the same grift. Their job is controlled opposition. It's to keep you having the conversation within the boundaries that they're setting. So here's another one making some really remarkable claims. She's another commentator for CNN, Areva Martin. The case of Luigi Mangione exemplifies the privilege afforded to white men who often benefit from a presumption of innocence and leniency, while individuals of color are subjected to harsher scrutiny and punishment. And here she makes a really remarkable claim. An attractive white man is heralded as a hero. If this were an African American or Latino man, it is doubtful that you would see such an outpouring of support. Honestly, I would argue that you might see more of an outpouring of support because you'd have a lot of the liberal class would feel more comfortable getting invested in him, and they have an outsized voice in the media. In fact, you would likely see the opposite, as men of color are often villainized in the media as dangerous threats. There is a long history of romanticizing the beautiful and incarcerated, with particular privilege given to white men. Now, here's where the claim is really remarkable. Consider, for example, Charles Manson and the number of women who became his prison pen pals. Now, it's very revealing that she has to fall back on the fact, and it's not just Charles Manson. You always get this with these very famous killers. You have certain women with a tick, with a quirk, who become romantically enamored of these famous murderers and criminals. That's not even particular to Charles Manson. But the point that she's making is that these white people are valorized. Are you saying that Charles Manson was valorized? You're saying he was valorized. Charles Manson, dead at 83, endured as the face of evil for nearly 50 years, including the photograph. It's probably the most famous picture of Charles Manson. Are you saying they were valorizing Charles Manson by putting the crazy eyes picture?
No, she's saying he had
in
women
every
around
article
him,
about him.
He had women around him before he was caught. I mean, he was a cult leader. It was
a cult leader. But aside from that, the point that she's making, that's why she has to fall back on individuals were enamored of Charles Manson, because you can't make the argument that the press valorized Charles fucking Manson. If anything, they scapegoated him for everything in the counterculture that they were trying to squash, as our friend, we have his book back there, Tom O'Neill writes about in his book, Chaos. The whole thing may have been a setup by the intelligence agencies to disgrace the counterculture. To argue as part of this argument, well, just look at how favorable Charles Manson's treatment in the press was, is crazy. And that's why she has to fall back on that you have some weird women who were into him. So moving on, this is the one that really made the rounds. The Guardian, being the rag that it is. Media's empathetic coverage of Luigi Mangione reveals an obsession with humanizing white male subjects. On social media, Mangione has received sympathy and in some circles been celebrated for his suspected role in the murder. Meanwhile, a fundraiser for Mangione's legal defense has collected nearly $150,000. Many have turned Mangione into a martyr, said Dr. Joseph Richardson, a professor of African American Studies, medical anthropology, and epidemiology at the University of Maryland. But he adds, we clearly know had Mangione been a young black man, the narrative would be different. You know, okay, so isn't it funny that this is exactly the counterpart of Matt Walsh's argument, only in the other direction? Matt Walsh is saying if he had been black, it would have been a completely different story if the victim had been black. They're saying if the perpetrator had been black, it would have been a different story. But both of them are meant to funnel you back into the approved narrative about this killing. The wall-to-wall coverage of Mangione has been interpreted as a result of Thompson's status as a healthcare industry executive in a country where many people are frustrated about rising healthcare costs and lack of insurance coverage. But the acceptance of that explanation itself reflects a racist double standard. As Richardson sees it, the empathetic media coverage is a symptom of what else? Dun, dun, dun. White male privilege. Of course it is. Okay, so I want to take this on a little bit. I am not going to argue that crime is not covered differently depending on the race of perpetrators and victims. I would agree with that. I would say at this point in time, it has that type of racial bias in media coverage that they're talking about. You see that more prevalently in street crime, economic crime, lower level crime. You know, tabloids like the New York Post obviously will racialize those types of crimes. You know, the person getting robbed coming out of the train, that kind of thing. Something that a person like this is paid not to notice, and people like the academics she's quoting are never paid to really study, is there's another type of media bias that is really not racially determined. It's determined by the type of crime and the class of crime. They are perfectly happy to crucify a white person in another direction if it serves a political narrative, or to canonize a black person if it serves a political narrative. So, for example, let's talk about manifestos. Apparently, it wasn't dangerous to hear about the racist manifesto from white supremacist mass murderers like the Buffalo shooter. His stuff was released immediately. The Nashville trans shooter who killed Christian children and teachers, manifesto still under wraps. Weird, huh? And that's true. They never released the manifesto. Eventually, it leaked. Within hours of obtaining Luigi Mangione's manifesto, authorities released it to the public. 244 days after obtaining Audrey Hale's manifesto, there's the trans shooter, authorities still hadn't released it, but it was finally leaked. Why the difference? Okay, because Audrey Hale does not fit the narrative. The idea of a trans shooter who shot up kids at a Christian school, whose manifesto called them little rich crackers, does not fit the narrative. It does not fit the narrative. Trans people are only to be portrayed as victims, never to be portrayed as perpetrators, whereas the white supremacist shooter in Buffalo, that's fine. As long as that manifesto says the things that we want to ascribe to him. If it had said something else, they might not have released it if it had complicated the narrative. Now with Mangione, That manifesto is released right away because they are trying to class him in a certain way within the narrative. Now, I think it backfires on him because they're trying to portray him as a dangerous criminal, and a lot of people found his manifesto sympathetic. But okay, that's why they're very selective. And with the trans shooter, they claimed legally they couldn't release it, but legally they release all these other manifestos. So it really depends on what narrative they're trying to serve. Another white perpetrator, you might remember this happened during COVID at a time when they were really trying to gin up paranoia about crime against Asians. There was a perpetrator, Robert Aaron Long, who shot up a massage parlor in Georgia. 8 people died, including 6 women there. They tried to make it out to be a hate crime. The local police investigated. They said, no, anti-Asian hate was not a motive. He said this guy had a few screws loose. He considered them sexually tempting. They were sexually tempting him. The FBI investigated. They said there's no hate crime. Did not stop Raphael Warnock, elected member of the Senate, from saying we all know hate when we see it and insisting that it was a hate crime. So you could argue that this criminal, in this case and in some other cases, was actually treated worse because he was white, because the idea of this crime at that moment during the pandemic, when they were really trying to keep people from talking about the origins of the virus, the idea that this was part of a wave of anti-Asian hate fit a certain narrative, and it didn't matter what any law enforcement agency said about it. Now, George Floyd. George Floyd was murdered by the police, and rightly, there was a public outcry about it. But George Floyd was a career criminal who was in the process of committing a crime at the time that he was murdered. That does not in any way justify his murder. That doesn't mean drawing attention to the murder was the wrong thing to do. But George Floyd is an example of a black criminal who was canonized. He was literally, as you can see in this picture, he was literally canonized. The crimes that he committed were downplayed. Now, I'm not litigating that. I'm not, he became a symbol for a broad systemic problem. I understand that. But if you're going to make the argument, black criminals are always treated badly and white criminals are always romanticized, well, that doesn't really fit the facts. There's a level of that, but there's another level in which the way different criminals are treated has less to do with race than it has to do with narrative management and the type of crime that they've committed and whether the media finds it convenient to portray them as perpetrators or as victims. So now this was probably the best reaction I saw to this. Please, God, let this work. That's really what this boils down to. All of these people, whether from the anti-woke, the woke, what have you, corporate media, podcast, they are all desperately scrambling to suppress the kind of incident that scares elites. They don't like it when the natives get restless like this. This is terrifying to them. That a guy went and gunned down a CEO, and everyone from all sides of the political spectrum are cheering. But this is one more example where they have really revealed themselves as handmaidens to power. A lot of these people you think are anti-establishment, they're not anti-establishment. Look, Matt Walsh, CNN, New York Times, Guardian, they all have the same agenda. They all have the same agenda to funnel you back into arguing about identitarian issues that in the end doesn't threaten people like Brian Thompson.
Well, yeah, I mean, when it comes to, perceptions and attitudes, like racial attitudes towards crimes, I mean, a lot of that depends on, is there a narrative to be spun? It depends on how high profile the individual case is. Like, on a whole, when you talk about crime, I mean, it's well documented, it's well established in a million different ways that the system cracks down harder on black people than white people. Because
sure, absolutely.
999 out of 1,000 crimes, I would say probably more, probably 4,999 out of every 5,000 crimes are not, do not capture any sort of public conversation, right?
Sure.
Not every crime becomes as viral as this one, but not, most of them do not capture a public conversation. There's no political message to send there. And so, yes, for a million different factors, which we've talked about a million times, yes, the system overall definitely cracks down on black people harder than white people.
Yes.
When it comes to a high-profile instance, yeah, it depends on the case. It depends on the
Right.
circumstance. It depends on what angle they're trying to spin. It depends on what message they're trying to send. And, there's an infinite number of stories and angles and takes they could want to instill people. And there's that all depends on, that's on a case-by-case basis. Right. And
Right.
so the other thing that's sort of dishonest about making the argument that racial bias has anything to do with the perception of Luigi is you're conflating.
First of all, his name's Luigi.
Yeah. Well, the real dishonest thing here is to conflate a viral, high profile case like this with the average crime.
Exactly.
Right, because that's what you're
saying.
doing. What they're doing is they are trying to signal that every crime has the kind of cultural implication as this one, which is simply not true. This has been the most viral news story now for almost 3 weeks.
There's what I'm saying. You're talking about two different things.
Right,
Yes,
it's apples and oranges.
there is a media bias when the guy gets punched in the face on 22nd Street.
Right.
There is a difference in the way they cover that kind of thing about white people and black people. Absolutely. This is different. When you're talking about these kinds of national stories, it really depends on narrative management much more than it does on race. And attributing it to race is part of the narrative management. That's exactly what they're trying to do here. They're trying to manage the narrative by making it about race from both sides, whether it's Matt Walsh or whether it's The Guardian. They all want to make it about anything except what it's actually about.
Right. And we have to say we do not condone vigilante justice, and
No, of course we don't.
we hope that this case is solved, and
We hope they find the real killers.
Right. Well, in my opinion, there's some doubt as to that, because how does a guy smart enough to commit that crime walk around with the murder weapon on him?
That's
right. And so that is one more angle of this. He is a suspect with innocence assumed until his guilt has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt.
Killer.
Yeah, and I don't know how you prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt when we're expected to believe that a guy shrewd enough to do the things he did for the first 5 days still had the murder weapon and the manifesto on his person. That doesn't make sense to me. So that is one more facet of this, that this sort of, black and white, no pun intended, take here does not factor into consideration, which is that he has a right to a trial, and 12 people still have to be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that he's the guy.
Yeah.
All right.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, exactly. Luigi is white. I thought he was Italian. Oh, look at that, John. And
yeah, back in the day.
Yeah, back in the day. That's right. Yeah. Who needs world peace when you can have the gabagool, says Ken Minji. Thank you, Ken Minji. Appreciate that. Sunrise, thanks for the $10. Wishing fellow dissidents a peaceful Christmas. Thank you, Sunrise. Appreciate that very much. All right. What we got here? There's 90s rap entourage is much smaller than Mangioni's perp walk. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no.
Yeah, a lot of people counterpose that with the Superman arrest scene.
Right.
Superman versus Batman with the paintings of Jesus.
That's right.
After being betrayed.
My real name says not so heartbroken. I said my real name. I'm as heartbroken as the average person about this. I'm every bit as heartbroken.
Yeah.
I'm not more or less heartbroken than the average person about it.
Keaton's very average.
Those are my sentiments about this. Yes, I'm very average. I'm just like everybody else. Jury has hung his Mangione with his giant pair of meatballs. There you go. Thank you, Stoopside. Appreciate that. Reasonable doubt is safe and effective. That's right. It's a very high bar to clear. Luigi was framed by Mario, evidence planted by Yoshi, while Princess got thirsty off his Tinder profile. There, case solved. And Merry Christmas, Russ and Keaton. Merry Christmas, Kenman.
Merry Christmas.
Appreciate that very much. Wouldn't he had left his manifesto at the crime scene along with the weapon? What's the point of the manifesto then? Yeah, he's trying not to get caught, but he writes a manifesto and keeps it with him even though he doesn't want to get caught. Again, you make that make sense beyond a reasonable doubt to me. Again, the bar is guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. So you could think the odds are better than 50-50 that he did it. You have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. You can't just think he did it. You have to know it. And that needs to be raised.
I hope his lawyer is watching today.
Yeah. They need to ask that
question. We're giving our pearls.
Exactly. Like we need answers to that question. It's important that we get answers to that question, I think. Okay. All right. We have one final segment of the day. Folks, we're going to leave you with this segment. This is a very fitting Christmas Eve final segment of the day as the sun goes down here and Santa gets ready. Let's all remember, folks, that Jesus was born in Bethlehem, which is currently in the occupied West Bank. So Munther Isaac, who gave a viral Christmas sermon last year called Christ in the Rubble, tweets this out. Christ is still in the rubble. Munther Isaac, full Christmas message, a vigil from Bethlehem to the world. So here is Christian Palestinian pastor Munther Isaac giving his Christmas sermon this year. Like I said, his sermon last year went far and wide. And this year's vigil was fantastic as well. We're not going to play the whole thing. The whole thing was 20 minutes. This is the tweet. You can look him up and watch the whole thing. We're going to play the last 10 minutes. We're going to full screen this and mute up, and then we'll have some final thoughts on this afterwards. But here is the second half of Munther Isaac's Bethlehem vigil from the occupied West Bank, Christ still in the rubble.
Find the intersection of In Palestine, we find the intersection of colonialism, supremacy, the logic of might is right, militarism, racism, and religious fundamentalism. All of these come together in Palestine. Palestine is a human and moral cause. And for the church, as one of my friends said, it is a theological crisis. It is about the credibility of our witness. It is here that we come face to face with the tragic consequences of bad theology. Actually, this is much more than bad theology or even ideology. Zionism and Christian Zionism are ideologies of supremacy. It is racism. Zionism and Christian Zionism turned God into a racist, tribal deity of their own image. So we must call things for what they are. And today also, we acknowledge all those who stood on the side of justice and truth. All those who said no to dehumanization, many of whom actually paid a heavy price. We salute you. See, solidarity by definition is costly. And over the last 440 days, we have heard you in churches, in mosques, in synagogues, in the streets, in universities, in governmental buildings, in front of armed factories, protesting, organizing, lobbying. We have heard you, and today we thank you. Dear friends, it is indeed painful that we live in a time when a genocide is committed before the eyes of the world, and we feel powerful to stop it. And today, as we gather around Christ in the rubble, we remember the children of Gaza. We remember the children of Bethlehem before them, and many others around the world who have fallen victim to the tyranny of Herod and his modern-day counterparts, the massacre of innocents. A voice was heard in Ramah, the prophet cried thousands of years ago, weeping and great mourning. Rachel weeps for her sons and daughters and refuses to be comforted because they are no more. A voice was heard in Bethlehem, and today we hear the same voice in Gaza, weeping and great mourning. We weep, we are crushed, we suffer, and we cry out, how long, O Lord? Why, O Lord? Why do you allow this, and why do you remain silent? Humanity has chosen Herod's path. Humanity glorified power and cruelty. It glorified domination, greed, weapons, and even the annihilation of others. Herod, unfortunately, tragically, is neither the first nor the last. This is the logic of empire. And in the logic of empire, we have fashioned God in this image, turning him into a god of war. But the question remains, why is God silent? And how long will Rachel weep for her children? How long will Gaza weep? We have continued to ask this question until we saw this God in his incarnation, sharing our same fate. He survived in his childhood, but not in his youth. As a child, he fled, becoming a displaced refugee in Egypt. But in his youth, he did not survive. He was crucified, executed, killed by the logic of empire, by the worship of power and extremism. Son of God shared our fate, our suffering, and cried the same cry we cry today, my God, why have you forsaken me? This is why we said last year, Christ is in the rubble. And this year we say, Christ is still in the rubble. The rubble is his manger. Jesus finds his place with the marginalized, the tormented, the oppressed, and the displaced. We look at the Holy Family and see them in every displaced and homeless family living in despair. In the Christmas story, even God walks with them and calls them his own. So today, let us reflect on the child Jesus, the child of Bethlehem. At the heart of the incarnation, there is a child. And this child, in his weakness, he is our hope. He is our consolation. He is our strength. This child, let us remember, this child shook Herod's throne when he was born. And while there are some who talk about their Roman Empire or glorify Herod as great, we are the ones who sing of a child born to refugees escaping a massacre. And you cannot worship both, by the way. I pray that the image of the child in the rubble will be deeply rooted in our hearts and minds way beyond this time. For Jesus was born among us and entered our world under the most difficult and harsh circumstances. His family suffered greatly to protect his life. The children of Bethlehem were massacred, but let us remember not all of them. Jesus survived this genocide. And Jesus survived by becoming a refugee with his family in Egypt. And then he returned to his land and his people, returned to serve, to build, to work, and to bring salvation and redemption. And in this resilient child and in his family, we find hope. For this child, whom we see today among the ruins, once stood before Pilate and Herod, and once faced death itself and triumphant, granting eternal redemption. And so with this hope and faith, we endure. We refuse today to despair, to surrender to despair, because our faith is the faith of the resurrection. From the midst of the rubble, a plant of life will arise, given the promise of a new dawn, the assurance of a harvest where justice and restoration will flourish, and the vine will bear fruit that nourishes generations to come. As the poet Mahmoud Darwish says, حبوب سنبلة تموت ستملأ الوادي سنابل. The grains of a dying ear of grain fill the valley with ears of grain. Today we embrace our calling in this wounded world and land. We insist on seeing the image of Jesus in every victim of oppression, marginalization, and violent ideologies of supremacy and empire. We will continue to declare the goodness and justice of God. Yes, it has been 440 days. It is 440 days of Palestinians' resilience, sumud, Indeed, it is 76 years of Sumud. But we have not and will not lose hope. Yes, it is 76 years of an ongoing Nakba, but it is also 76 years of Palestinian Sumud clinging to our rights and justice of our cause. 76 years of praying and singing for peace. I was thinking about it. We are stubborn people. We continue to pray for peace year after year after year and sing about peace, and we will continue to do so. And we will continue to echo the words of the angels, glory to God in the highest, peace on earth. And today we say our faith in the God of truth and justice is our hope. Today we continue to cry out to him because we believe that he hears us and because we believe in his justice and goodness and because we believe in his solidarity with the oppressed. As the psalmist says, I know that the Lord maintains justice for the poor and righteousness for the needy. We will cling to this promise. And in our steadfastness, in our sumud, let us have eyes of faith to perceive and believe that every Herod will pass, every Caesar will fade, for empires have an expiry date. And let us remember that according to Jesus, it is the meek, not the powerful, who inherit the land. In our pain and oppression, we might feel that death has the final word, that Herod is sovereign. But through the eyes of faith, we see that God has the final word. And it is a word of life and light, not a word of death and darkness. So in Christmas, God has spoken, and the word is Christ. Christ is born, hallelujah. Peace on earth, hallelujah. May it be so today. Amen.
So there you have it. Pretty powerful words. I'm not a religious person, but I still found that to be just an extremely compelling sermon. You know, we usually like to keep videos to about 5 minutes, and as I'm watching that, I'm like, I can't really cut any of this. I mean, it's all so worth hearing. I find it, as someone who's not religious myself, you kind of understand religion a little more hearing a thing like that, especially that this is the second sermon since this genocide began. You know, this is what you have to cling to. You know, people ask a lot. I mean, I have 3 kids, so people ask, you know, how could you bring kids into a world like this? Well, ask that to these people. How do Palestinians bring kids into a world? But they do. They're very family-oriented people because that struggle to have children and raise a family, that is the ultimate human struggle, period. And so, you know, it doesn't matter what the circumstances are. That is the struggle. That is where, you know, you derive meaning. And religion, I think, you know, strengthens that for a lot of people. And I think it gives a sort of cosmic meaning to that very human struggle. And I think that's what a lot of what that speaks to there. The other thing, the quote that stands out to me among many is, in the logic of empire, we have fashioned a god in this image, turning him into a god of war. Well, does that not describe Mike Huckabee to a T? I mean, that's what Christian nationalism is. That's especially what Christian Zionism is, also, and Jewish Zionism as well, right?
Yeah, he also calls Zionist God a racist God.
Right, which is absolutely right. And that is a function of the empire. In the logic of empire, we have fashioned the God in this image, making that God a God of war. We have crafted an image of God that justifies our place in the world, right? We don't ask ourselves, what would God think of our place in the world? No, we create a God according to our place in the world, and we make that make sense. That's Mike Huckabee. Mm-hmm. Those are the Christian Zionists. That they contort themselves to do that.
Well, that's part of what's absurd to me about the idea that Trump winning represents a defeat of the establishment, because or a triumph of democracy even, because nobody is for these policies. Not Christians. What, the Pope came out and said they were committing crimes against humanity? Yep. So not the Christians, not the Catholics, certainly not the Muslims, certain elements of Hindus, people on the right, people on the left, people in Europe, people in Asia. Everyone is against Israel. And yet you have a president and all of his appointees to a person are fanatically in favor of this horrific, genocidal, criminal apartheid state. Literally, ironically, tragically, given the history, one of the most barbaric, cruel, evil, psychotic states we have ever seen. We showed on the Patron show yesterday how they keep pushing honeypot videos of very young Israeli girls in IDF uniforms dancing as part of their Hasbaras, part of their attempt to make Israel look appealing to people. They're not above sexualizing their daughters in the military in order to get people's sympathies on the side of their genocidal project. It is really without peer in some of its activities, and at least on par, as Candace Owens pointed out, with the Nazi regime, whose crimes against them they have hid behind since 1948 and before, to obscure any real conversation about what the nature of their state is. I've said many times, again, it's Christmas, we want to be hopeful. I don't see how they continue to really function as a state on the world stage after this. I think the level of boycotts and diplomatic disentanglement from Israel and trade embargoes you're going to see, and brain drain that you're already seeing, and collapse of businesses, they're not going to be able to, at best, they're going to be in a third world condition as a result of all this. But it's just horrible to see this continuing to go on. You think back to the speech that he gave last year, and to think this is still continuing now. And you just sent me over that story that the United States trying to intimidate Spain.
Right.
This is part of why the United States, in the end, is going to lose its position in the world. Everyone hates us. Even our allies want us to go down at this point. You have to imagine most of these countries are saying, I can work with the Chinese.
Well, of course. And this is why, we were a little not hesitant to do the Tulsi segment. We step on third rails all the time. We don't care. But we were a little unsure about how that would be received, because it is to take a black pill to see that, this person who we thought was a beacon of integrity and maybe could spearhead, a movement towards a hope, turns out they're compromised, right? Look, this, not everybody's going to love this at first, but I didn't love this at first when I first heard it. But our friend Anis Shivani said to us many years ago at this point that to be invested in the success of this country at this point is to be criminally evil. And he said, I know that sounds harsh to say. And it was harsh to say. And, coming out of the Bernie thing when we all had hope, that was a real ton of bricks hitting you right in the face to hear that. He's fucking right. Now, that doesn't mean you root for the suffering of your own people. We root for the Amazon workers. We want each other to live good lives. We want the American people to prosper and be healthy and safe and fulfilled. This is not a diatribe against the people. But if you're rooting for the success of this state, to invest hope in the managers of this state is to be complicit in the crimes of this state. What are you rooting for this country as a political entity in its current form for? How does this country deserve anything but a miserable downward spiral? As an entity on the world stage, should we have solidarity with each other and pull through as best we can? Yes, I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about if you are investing hope in anyone near the top of this structure at this point, you are rooting for the success of a criminal state, of a genocidal thug on the world stage.
Right.
That's us. That's what this country is right now.
Well, think
so
about
I
it this
don't.
way.
The reason I'm not invested in Tulsi Gabbard is because I'm not invested in this country as a project. It does not deserve to succeed. What are you rooting for? What are you rooting for? You're rooting for the success of a country that's going to bully our allies into covering up the crimes of this terrorist proxy of ours? I'm sorry. I don't take any. I should say I am not invested in that whatsoever, and I don't invest any hope in people or organizations or parties or movements that seek to maintain this country as a dominant player on the world stage, which they all do. They all do. This is why Donald Trump is not a threat to the establishment at the end of the day. We started this live stream with a comical example of this. So on a whim, he wants to invade Panama now. He wants to crush Panama because they're overcharging us at the port, right? Right. So everyone is on board with that, more or less. His whole movement is on board with that, more or less, which is why there is no meaningful difference between the MAGA rank and file and Trump himself in that very fundamental sense. Yeah, most people are decent people. Most people are horrified by the sight of children being burned alive at a field hospital. So yeah, that's why I think a decent amount, I don't know what the statistics are, but that's why you have MAGA for Palestine people at the Rescue the Republic rally. Just because people, even if their politics are fucked, they have a fundamental decency where they can see children being killed and they can recoil at that. But politically speaking, yeah, man, they're backing him on the Panama Canal thing. That tells you what you have to know. They believe in American dominance, which means they believe in a world run by Tony Soprano.
Right.
Our Tony Soprano. That's not something I invest in. I'm not invested in that. Anyone who's on board with that, I could take them or leave it. I have no attachment to them whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, our political project is to make America not about that.
Right,
exactly. That's what we're invested in. We want this is what people have to realize. You prospering is at odds with their political project.
Right.
You have to undo a lot of your assumptions. You want to see it clearly. Look at these average schmoes who on the drop of a dime are screaming about Panama. So what if we did get back to Panama Canal? What would it do for you? What would it do for you? You have been brainwashed into thinking that the triumphs of your masters are your own. That is a peasant mind. That is the peasant saying, oh, how did our Lord do at the joust?
Right.
What does that do? Wait, you take pride in how your local lord did the joust? Why? Does that put food on your table? That's the peasant mind, to find your own meaning in the activities, struggles, and triumphs of the upper classes that really don't care about you and do nothing for you, that you're never going to have any meaningful connection to. But somehow you're deeply emotionally invested in their triumphs and tribulations. Why? Why? You start asking yourself that, and you're going to realize your whole life has been a con. You've been conned your whole life to think that you owe something to these people, whether politicians, whether CEOs, what have you. Or, and this is part of it, all of that is aimed at directing you into supporting their political projects, like supporting Israel.
Right.
And
exactly.
most people really don't. Most people really don't. So where's the democracy?
Exactly. And that's what makes that his sermon another especially moving element of that. And what makes the image of Christ in the rubble so moving is because he attaches the transcendent to the ordinary person. He says, we see the transcendent in us because we're in the rubble. And we are connecting the story of Jesus, whether you believe in it as fact or don't. I'm not a religious person, but you could see the poetry in that, to connect the transcendent to the here and now, and to see the transcendent in ordinary people who are suffering unimaginably. That is extremely powerful, and I think it's even more powerful in the sense that this has now been going on for over a year, and he's still up there saying that. All right, so let's take the rest of our super chats and rumble rants, and then we will wish you all a good night. Eric Maines, sorry, what do we got here? Eric Maines on YouTube. Did I forget to say FUVTube for censoring, folks? Happy New Year, all. I'm optimistic the laughs will increase exponentially in 2025. Well, you're in the right place for that, my friend, we hope. Nexus Games, thanks for the $5. Wonder why the same level of justice wasn't demanded for the Boeing CEO heading to testify in court. Yeah, there you go. Eric Rousseau.
People are not as broadly personally affected by Boeing.
Exactly. That everybody has a health insurance horror story. Eric Rousseau says, I learned from The Godfather that you drop the weapon at the scene and calmly walk away. Yes, exactly.
And tape up the handle.
Exactly. Like I've never done anything like that. I would never dream of doing anything like that. And even I know the first rule of that is to lose the murder weapon. So my line is, I don't think he did it. I don't think he did shit. I didn't see nothing. He didn't do shit. He has a right to a fair trial. Psycho Kitty 666, thanks for the $10. I have MS and my daughter is autistic. I fight insurance regularly. F that heartless CEO. I hope Luigi's jury is nullified. Thank you, Psycho Kitty. Appreciate that very much. Okay, what do we got here? TPS Report 13. Thanks for the $5. Can't wait to watch MS Media cucks burn credibility trying to gaslight the public on how to view Luigi in 2025.
Oh my God, covering that trial, they are not going to know whether to shit or wind their wristwatch.
Yeah, exactly. That is going to be quite something. Robot Leg, like censorship, celebrating the persecution of an enemy leads to more enemy deaths, which is great until you find yourself on the wrong person's enemy list. Not true in this case. No, it is true in this case, and that's why I said, and that's the point that Jordan made. This is why you can't condone it, because this leads to a fascist revolution. That's what this will lead to, especially when the state is as armed as they are. Look at the perp walk. Look at what he was surrounded. That's a perp walk. That's when there was no perceived threat to anybody. What if this becomes regular? Then that's going to lead to a fascist revolution, to the point where the structures of society will not resemble what they do now, and they will resemble something darker and worse. That's why we say, like civil disobedience and mass movements are the way. I believe that. I'm not just saying that with a wink. I believe that. At the same time, people's emotional response to an event is what it is. You can't actually control your emotions. You learn this in acting school or acting class, whatever. The difference between emotion and action is that you really can't control your emotions. You can control your actions. That's why we don't punish people for feeling things. We punish people for doing things. So when you get out of line as a kid and your mother or father says, you got to control your emotions, what they mean is you have to control what you do with those emotions. You have to control your actions, right? That's why acting is called acting. It's not called being. It's not called feeling. It's called acting, because acting is to act, to put whatever emotions you have into action, not to fake an emotion. You can't do that. You can't control whether you laugh at a joke. If the joke makes you laugh, you laugh. If you don't, you don't, unless you're being nice and then you fake a laugh for somebody, and then most people can pick up on that. So people's emotional response to this is beyond their control. And as our previous chatter said, if you have a chronic health problem, if you have a child with a condition that needs management and care, and you have to fight with these people to get that, you're not going to feel sympathetic to the person at the top of the structure that is often a barrier to care. Like, you're just not going to feel that. Doesn't mean you condone an action, but you, at the same time, you can't help yourself but feel what you feel in response to that. So that would be my answer to that. Yeah, no, if this becomes regular, this will turn into North Korea times 10. If this becomes a regular thing. That's why you can't condone it becoming
It'll
because
be like
they'll just crush
9/11
us.
times 11.
They will just crush the public at that point. So that's a good question. It's a fair question. And I'm glad you asked it. Because now we'll clip that into our original segment so we don't get banned. Ha ha. What do you like that? All right. So I think that's everything, right? Do we have anything else? Oh, yeah, we do have.
We just got one last minute.
Yeah, well, we have a few more. Got one, what, a super chat?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. All right. Why isn't it populating here? Was it super chat or a Rumble rant?
Rumble rant.
Rumble rant. Okay. All right. Sorry. Yeah, we got a few more of these. Hold on. I'll copy and paste these into here. All right. All right. Let's see what we got here. Sorry, folks. I forgot to copy and paste these over. That was stupid of me. Okay. Here we go. All right. Now we are up to date. Bonzo Beans. I don't know how to say that. I don't know. Thanks for the Bethlehem sermon. Peace, Bonzo Beans. Thank you, Bonzo Beans. Appreciate that. Damn, Keaton, that rooting for evil rant hit hard. Well done. On a brighter note, happy Kwanzaa, gentlemen. Yeah, well, that's what. Look, Anis told us that a few years ago, and I was at first we're like, well, what do you mean? Do you mean we should not try to create a better world? And that's not what it means. What it means is just like anybody who represents this country as what it is should not be rooted for. At this point, you need to rebuild.
Right.
You have to rebuild. You have to remake it because this thing that it currently is not a noble thing. It's not a good thing. I dare you to fucking argue with me on that. Look at what we've been seeing for the past year. Look at kids with heads blown in half. Look at what we won't even enforce. Forget about not enforce. We're bullying our own allies to not enforce the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant against the guy who's killing children at a wholesale level. Tell me the country that does that is an intrinsically and inherently good country that should be supported. It is not. It is not. That is a statement of basic moral clarity. That's not a brilliant statement. That's just basic moral clarity that you have had deprogrammed out of your mind.
Yeah. It's like, are you going to take the keys
Not you, Robot.
away?
I'm just saying the average person. Yeah, sorry.
Are you going to take the keys away from the drunk driver who is wrecking the neighborhood?
Right.
Or are you going to say, you know what? I think we need to fill up his gas tank.
Right. Exactly. Panama, fuck yeah. Yeah, I wanted to do the America fuck yeah sound drop in that. I forgot to put it in the clip, actually. But thank you. Kenman G says, Joe Rogan, so I watched his sermon by Munther Isaac. He's Muslim, right? Ah, ha, ha, ha. Good one. Yeah. Jameson Doan says, I sent you a very important email, guys. Also in the spirit of religiosity, Merry Hellsmas, Hail Satan. All right, I will check my email, my friend. Thank you for that. Very much. Luis Brooks. Oh, for $100. Let's take cowbell for Louise. Thank you very, very much. That's very kind of you. Sending love. Just lost a dear friend who is only 30. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Very sorry to hear that. Love your people. Love each other. We have to stand together to save us. Well, thank you, Louise. Right. And very sorry to hear that news. That is brutal. That is really tough. So thank you for that donation and for those words, and our deepest sorrow for you. That is brutal. Folks, that's our show. We thank you very much for being here. Have a nice Christmas Eve. Have a nice Christmas, and we will see you back here on Sunday evening. That's Sunday the 29th at 7 p.m. So we get a little break. We'll be dropping clips between now and then, so you'll see some of us on the replay. But we thank you all very, very much for your support this year. Our show on the 29th is our year-end award show. Even though it's not the last broadcast of the year, it's the last Sunday night flagship broadcast of the year. So the 29th will be year in review. We'll hand out our awards of the year. We'll evaluate our predictions for the year and make predictions for next year. So that's kind of a special show coming up on the 29th, Sunday at 7 p.m. Until then, thank you, Jonathan, for the 10-pound donation there and the super sticker. Thank you all for being here with us this afternoon. Please have a fun and safe Christmas Eve and a blessed Christmas Day tomorrow. Until we see you again, be safe and be well.
Merry Christmas and courage.
Please clap.